Okay, folks, welcome. I am going to share my screen. And there we have the, let me see now, how do I get rid of these? People have been messaging me to get rid of these webcams up at the side, and I'm just trying to see how I do it.
Ross, when you go to share your screen, you can just share a certain part of the screen, a certain document or certain.
Whenever well, maybe I've got it now. Actually, I've got it now. Everybody seeing my screen, okay? Yeah.
Desktop up.
Yes, we can see that, Ross.
Okay, cheers. All right, so first up this evening is Alan Walker. Alan, can you unmute yourself, or William will do it for you?
Can you all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Good evening, Alan. So you are a member of Keswick Photographic Society?
Correct.
And that is in the Lake District, for anybody who doesn't know. And you're an MPAGB, probably what, 3 years now?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so your first image is up, Alan. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Well, for those of you who don't know me, I guess my sort of first and foremost passion is taking images of creatures both in the wild and in a captive situation, but certainly photographing nature. This selection I've chosen are all nature images, because I'm guessing quite a lot of you will have a whole mix. So apologies for those of you who may be bored with nature stuff. This is a particular favourite of mine. It was taken last year in the Kruger, and it was a very dry spell, and consequently lots and lots of dust, which really does make fantastic images, particularly when you've got a group of elephants coming through, and these were on their way to a waterhole, just a little family of mum and aunties and youngsters. And I went for a high key effect. I shot it at plus 2/3 and took it intentionally that it would eventually end up as a sort of high key mono, which I'm pleased with. It kind of works for me, and there was very little detail in the sky anyway. It was one of these kind of bland pale blue skies which are incredibly boring, and I just felt this treatment worked for it and brought out the emphasis of the animals coming towards you at the bottom of the frame. That's about all I really think I can say, unless you've got any questions.
Nope.
Go to the next.
Yeah.
Yeah. These are a couple of barn owls. These are captive owls. We've got a friend who lives down in the south of England who breeds these beautiful birds. And here's a pair of them. And what is wonderful about these creatures is that you just stand them in this case, on a couple of posts, and then just wait and see what happens. And it's all about the interaction between the two. Clearly, the light has made the images, because there's some beautiful backlight, evening backlight, creating really, really lovely effects coming through the wings. And again, just love the reaction of one grasping the other one. They are actually not fighting. They're just the one on the left is actually the younger one. It's more curiosity than actually aggression, but it comes across very, very nicely as a potential fight, particularly if you're going to put it into a competition.
The expression on that little one is just fantastic.
It is, and it looks really aggressive, where in fact it's sort of saying, hello, you know, my name's Dyson. This is another image taken quite recently. It was taken early this year. It's taken on a lake called Lake Kokini, which is on the border of Bulgaria and Greece. The easiest way to visit it is to fly to Bulgaria and then travel by road across the border to get to it. And you visit there in the winter. This was February, I think, from memory. So consequently, quite a bit of snow around, and of course, a lot of the lake is frozen. This was taken with a very wide angle, 15mm lens, laying down on the edge of a boat with my arms outstretched to capture this wide effect. And although it looks like a very big winged bird, if you look closely, it's actually the wings of two birds with the others tucked in. But I think it gives a great effect, and they are grasping for fish which we have on the boat, and hence the fact you can lure them in with these fish, and you can see the broken ice in the foreground. The background I particularly like as well, because it sort of goes away into nothing but sets the scene in terms of environmental landscape, nature image.
Excellent.
This one, some of you may have seen before. It's a particular favourite. It was taken in Costa Rica a few years ago now, and has done very well in competitions and got me into the Masters in Print and so on. It was a very fortuitous shot, because the effect that you've got is actually real rain at the back. So we were in Costa Rica, where we had quite a lot of rain while we were there, but we were under a shelter, and we were photographing these creatures. And what happens is one of the guys goes away and brings a snake. You don't go wandering around looking for these snakes. Brings a snake into a sort of position where you can photograph it. But behind was this torrential rain. So of course the snake was a bit wet, and it really added to, I think, the atmosphere of the shot. And then of course the added bonus with the snake just flicking its tongue at the right moment.
The green there is just amazing. You know, it's throughout the whole picture.
It's beautiful, isn't it?
I remember I was sitting beside you when that one scored 15 in the print championships.
Yeah, that was a while ago. I think that was your wedding anniversary at the time.
It was, you're right. Yeah.
This is a relatively recent. This was taken the end of last year when we were down in Dublin with Bob and Anne, and we went to the zoo. And I've admired for some time now pictures that photographers have taken of the orangutans in the zoo, because you can get some, I think, some quite beautiful images. And this orangutan, this female, is very obliging. Now, I'll tell you now up front that what she was looking at was actually a dandelion, but the dandelion head had gone. So I had to put the dandelion head back on, because I didn't think it worked, because the title is He Loves Me, He Loves Me Not. And I just managed to get a few of the little heads, seed heads, as you can see, just going away. And it just looks as if she is blowing that dandelion head, which really appealed to me, which basically gave me the title and the composition of the shot.
And of course, that means that this image could be entered now in PAGB.
Probably. It's very confusing, Ross, because they keep changing it, and now they've removed montage, and I guess this would be classified as a montage. So
the rule is, if it looks like nature, it is nature. So that to me would satisfy the definition. So get it entered. Yeah.
Well, this is not a montage. This is taken in Montana, at the mountain line. There's a guy in Montana where you can go again in the wintertime up in the mountains, and he has some cats which just roam around, and he's more than happy for you to photograph them, as long as you obviously pass over real dollars. And certainly it's a question of where you want to get the image and what angle you want to get the cat in. But I like this particularly because I love the fact that there's no real background other than just the snow, and of course the sunlight is on and it's just coming into the shadow. It was a bugger exposure wise. This was shot at about +2, and then obviously worked on a little bit afterwards. But yeah, it was very pleasing, and it was quite successful in my M panel. Another particular favourite of mine. This was taken in Japan. This was a very lucky shot. We were travelling in Hokkaido in Japan in a small minibus with other photographers, and we saw this fox by the roadside, and the fox just basically stopped to look. And a few people got off to take pictures of this fox and then got back on because it was very, very cold. And then the fox started walking and then started running back the way we came. So I got out along with 2 other photographers. Everyone else very sensibly stayed on board. And all I had on was just a thick fleece. I didn't have a jacket or anything, with a 1DX with a 100 to 400 attached, and had to start running back along this icy road. And then the fox jumped, did its traditional stop, look, then did the fox jump, and then buried its head and then pulled out of the snow this little vole, dropped it, and then looked at it like this, as if it couldn't really believe what it'd seen. And then, of course, it did what all foxes do. It ate it. But it's just that moment of looking at it and the vole wondering whether I've got away with this or not.
Excellent. Love that one. Oops.
This is a classic Masai Mara shot taken a few years ago now. It's all about, those of you who've been on safari will know, it's all about luck and how good the guy who's driving the safari vehicle is in working out where you're going. So quite a lot of the vehicles went in a different direction, trying to work out where this Thompson's gazelle was going to run. But our driver was clearly much sharper than the rest, and he went completely opposite direction to everyone else and got just the spot where the Thompson came running through, pursued by these 3 siblings, 2 males on the right, and then the one that's looking a bit vacant in the background is the sister, who really didn't get quite the hang of hunting. She kind of just hung back while the 2 boys got on with it. But eventually, after chasing this gazelle for quite a time, they eventually caught it. But it gave them quite a chase, and they weren't very experienced hunters.
Brilliant, brilliant shot. This one remind me, whenever I was judging over in Carlisle there in October,
yeah,
did I award this one?
You gave it, I think, 14 because you said it needed a bit of a vignette on it, which I've done since, which I hope you like the bit more of a vignette around the, just it darkened down the outer edges. But it's kind of, again, one of these pictures where back down to the friend we've got who breeds owls. He also breeds little owls, and again putting these owls on this post and then leaving them. And little owls have amazing faces, so if you watch long enough, they come up with very curious looks, and I just love it. And again, it lent itself to the title as, you know, whose idea was it to shelter here? Because they just look fed up with the rain. The leaf doesn't offer a great deal of protection. I just love the fed up look on the one on the left.
The expressions are brilliant.
Yeah,
you know, it's a nature shot, but it's a touch of comedy as well. It tells a story.
Yeah. It's just, and the little drops of the water just kind of, I think, add to the overall finish to it. This is back to Montana. This was again the same guy who's got the mountain lions. He's got this lynx. Sadly, this lynx is no longer with us because it's a few years ago now. But this lynx was again quite happy to run around in the snow, and we watched it for a while and noticed that at certain points he used to sort of jump. And the question was just trying to capture it in midair. And once you got that shot, there was no other shot to compare with it. This little lynx was the cover boy of the Edinburgh Festival exhibition a few years ago. They obviously liked it and put it on their posters.
How big are these things?
It's about the size of, do you know the size of a bobcat? About a bobcat size. Certainly much bigger than a domestic cat, but smaller than a lot of the other cats. So yeah.
That big paw there is just amazing.
Yeah, well, because this is a youngster, their paws are out of proportion to their body, so they have quite big feet because they do live in cold areas when obviously they do hunt in the snow. So their feet are obviously quite important to spread out, like almost like snowshoes.
That's not 10 up already, is it?
Is it? There you go. Obviously, I talked too fast. Or
there you go. No, you're probably on time. Okay, so well done, Alan.
Thank you very much.
We can see Julie in the background there, so Julie's on later.
Yeah, she is.
Okay, so next up is David Sadler. David, can we get on muted?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Good evening, David. You're in Dundee.
I am, yes. I'm not really originally from around these parts. I'm from Yorkshire originally, but I've been here 30 years, so I'm kind of indigenous now.
Right. And you were, I mean, several of your images people might recognize from salons. You were very unlucky in your DPAGB attempt there, where I had to put my hands up as one of the judges.
Yeah, I've been unlucky. I've been unlucky twice. It's not luck. It's I'm third time lucky, maybe.
I was very honest with you about.
You were, no. The feedback was much appreciated, and I've taken it on board. I'm going to try again. So fingers crossed.
Man, if at first, or even if you don't succeed twice, the only way you can get it is to keep entering. You know. So
well, yeah, that's right.
I do wish you luck.
Thanks.
So you were in India fairly recently, was it?
I've been in India for a holiday recently, but I was at a conference in Dhaka, in Bangladesh of all places, just before Christmas, and I gave myself the weekend off beforehand, and I just went wandering, and I found myself in the shipyard of all places, and there's no health and safety here. You're allowed to wander, so I did just wander with a guide in inverted commas who I'd met on the quayside. And he took me right in, and you're allowed to wander around. There's nobody with a clipboard stopping you. And you can step across the fire pits and walk into the workshops. It's the most amazing place. And the locals are so friendly. They just don't see tourists very often. But I just love this one. The little boy there in the middle with the T-shirt stoking the fire, he must have been about 11 maybe. And the guy is obviously giving him a rollicking for not doing something properly. But I love the colours. I get a bollocking quite often for over processing my images, as you know. But I think the colours here just had to be brought out. The orange and the purples were just great amongst the grey.
What part of India is this?
This is Dhaka, Bangladesh.
Right.
Yeah, so it's. I should say my pictures are not necessarily my most successful, but they are my favourites.
Yeah.
I don't know how long this one will stay a favourite, but at the moment it's a firm favourite. I hope it does well. There's a few bits of litter and things I can tidy up, but I don't want to tinker with it too much because it is a travel image. So I want to try and keep it true.
Potentially, a crop in to there. I'm not sure he adds much of this here.
Yeah, the guy on the left and the propeller are a bit of a distraction there, aren't they?
All the pictures here, so you could probably crop it just to there. But good start.
So we'll see if it ends up staying a favourite. This has been a favourite for a while. I do like people with their dogs, and I like it when the owners look like the dogs. And this lady was great. It's easy to get pictures of people with the dogs. They just love a bit of a fuss. And this was on the seafront in Scarborough. It was Armed Forces Day. You see the dogs are wearing their camouflage buffs. So, you get down and you tickle them a little bit and then you ask, can I take a picture? No, sure. Do they mind the flash? No, not at all. So I was able to get down with my fisheye lens. 7 of my 10 pictures tonight are fisheye lenses, but I don't tend to make them obviously fisheye. I try to keep it a bit more subtle. But it does give you a great perspective. And a theme about a lot of my pictures is they're wacky subjects with a wacky lens, and therefore they deserve wacky processing. I get in trouble for that quite a lot, but I'm going to stick with it because it's my style.
Yeah, well, fair play to you for that. I think that was in your DPAGB panel, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
And I think I told you afterwards it was the haloing in the sky.
Yeah, this is an old picture. I have fixed that, but this isn't the fixed picture. This is another one. This is the old version.
If you fix that, I think you'll do okay with that.
Well, I hope so. Because it's in again.
The content with the 2 dogs and the up close with the wide angle lens works so well.
Yeah, it's what I do. Yeah. I don't just bother other people's dogs. I bother my own as well. These are our 2 looking at me saying, you do realise these bowls are empty. So it's very easy to get the undivided attention of the dogs is just put down the bowls, but they don't like them being empty. But if I'd put them with the food in, I would have got the tops of the heads and nothing more. So I had to give them empty. And again, this is another fisheye lens. And I just like the metallic bowls kind of suited the over-processed black and white finish. And again, I've toned this down quite a lot from where it was at DPAGB. And it's going in again, so we'll see.
Yeah.
Okay. This is what I do. This was my. I don't have a genre, but I did have a personal style. And around the time of my ARPS, I was doing a lot of these fisheye selfies, which are over processed. This one, I've got this lovely old dentist drill that I've got a car boot sale. It didn't have a drill in it, so I had to put my own drill bit in. And then I just obviously gone very close with the fisheye lens and a big angle poise lamp. I'm trying to go for The Kindly Dentist here. That's the title, but all I've ended up with is Howard Shipman, really. But no, it's an image I'm fond of. It's one I'm keen to use. So I've tidied it up a little bit again, trying it again at DPAGB.
The size of that drill bit.
Yeah, I know. It's like it's deliberately wrong. Yeah, I could have put a bigger one in, but I thought that would be cruel. Okay, and this is the same shoot. See, the light's in the same place, the camera's in the same place, as are the flash guns. There's about 3 of them here, I think. And I just went and got changed. I went and got changed into my scrubs, and I put some blue food colouring in the syringe, and I borrowed a mask from my anaesthetist friend, and I'm deliberately unshaven and unapproachable looking. And so it's not so kindly anaesthetist, but the emphasis here is really that not just a menace in my face and the mask, but the needle as well. Okay. This one I call Puzzled. I started off taking a picture of a jigsaw, a power saw, in the garage. There it is upon the wall behind me, and I had it made into a jigsaw by send it away, and it comes back in the box. And here's me making the jigsaw on the table, which is me doing a jigsaw of me with a jigsaw. And I call this Puzzled. I actually took this a stage further. I made an online puzzle. You can send your pictures in and have an online puzzle made. I had an online puzzle of that image, which was me doing an online jigsaw of me doing an actual jigsaw of me with a jigsaw, I think. And then I left it at that. I thought that was taking it far enough. But I put this picture into competitions, and it's done okay in competitions. In fact, I submitted the jigsaw itself rather than the print. And Rod Whelans was the judge. I deliberately left the piece out, and he was able to comment, "Oh, there's a piece missing." But I was able to lean forward and hand him the piece, which Rod appreciated. And that jigsaw actually was accepted in the Edinburgh salon as a jigsaw, which I was quite pleased about.
Oh, excellent! I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, so I've only had 2 or 3 acceptances in Edinburgh, but I was pleased that the jigsaw made it in. Yeah. Okay. This is my Smile Out Loud picture. Whenever I'm feeling a little bit down, I just look at this, and these little mites always cheer me up. I was wandering the streets outside my hotel in India, in Madurai, I think it was, and these kids coming out of school saw me. They saw the camera. I saw them. I saw the camera. Without a word being said, they just lined up. See, they've got no shoes. Every one of them has got a big, broad grin. They're looking after each other. They're just a delightful bunch of kids. And then they just melted away. They were gone. But it was a real special moment. You couldn't recreate it. And as I say, it's my Smile Out Loud picture. It really warms my heart every time I see it. It's over-processed, but again, I love it. The kids were colourful and noisy, so's the picture.
It's David Sadler style, yeah?
It is, yeah. I don't mind that. Even the guy on the motorbike stopped and wanted to be in on it as well, so that was fine. I left him in.
Yeah, excellent.
Okay.
This one has done well for you now.
Yeah, this is probably my most successful picture. I've put it in. I don't usually put flog pictures in lots of salons, but I just want to see how far this one would go. It's had about 30 acceptances, and it's had 20 awards. It's been in the PAGB Masters of Print, but the best thing about that was the sponsors picked it as their favourite picture, and I won a Canon printer, a £1,000 Canon printer. But unfortunately, my printer, I'm used to it. I already got a good printer, which I'm used to. I didn't want it relearning it all again. So I sold it and I bought an electric skateboard instead. But I just love the fact that the guy is oblivious to the trains coming and going. The title is there on the left. I wish I'd checked, but he's just oblivious to the trains. He's engrossed in his music or his messages. whichever way he's going, he's missing his train because both trains are going in different directions. There's only 2 or 3 stops on the stations on the whole of the London Underground where you get the 2 trains going. Clapham North and Clapham Common are 2 of them. So I spent ages down there. Again, just a lucky shot, really. Nothing much to it. Just being in the right place with the right lens. Again, the fisheye lens.
Excellent.
Okay. This, I suppose, is a signature shot. This one's been around, and it's been in my ARPS panel. It's been in my CPAGB panel. It'll be in my D panel as well. It's just one I've got to use it because it's just epitomizes me, I suppose. It's actually 3 shots, 3 layers. 2 of them are taken with the camera inside the oven, looking out. So one's focused on the toast, one's focused on me, and then I take the camera out of the oven, put the oven on, and then take one looking in, because looking in, looking out, it's the same, really. So the 3 layers, basically 3/3 from top to bottom. I always get asked, did you melt the camera? So I usually jump in and tell them the story before they ask.
The trousers there, they look like what, Union Jack?
They are. It's my God Save the Queen Sex Pistols pajamas. In fact, it's up on the wall. There's my poster, the Sex Pistols poster. It's there on the wall as well.
I'll have to buy myself a pair.
Yeah, they're great. And my final picture is my absolute favourite. It's also my least successful, isn't it, Andrea? This is Love Hearts. I had about 10 packets, and some of the Love Hearts around the outside. Hello, Love First, Playtime First, Canny, Wicked. These are Try Me. These are genuine Love Hearts. But the ones in the middle are there for some subliminal messages for the judge. So we've got great JPEG, neat, cool pic, best image, I win, love it. I even told the judge what score to give it with a 20. Gave it 13. So I put it in another competition. Judge gave it 14. So since then, I've been trying it in every salon I can think of. And every time it fails in a salon, I love it a little bit more. And so far, I've loved it 30 times. And it still hasn't had an acceptance. So you can stick it. You can stick it. This is my image, and I'm not showing it to anybody else.
Brilliant.
And that's my favourite ever. It's also my least successful. So anyway, that's my 10. Seven of them are fisheye selfies, I must say, or fisheye lenses.
Absolutely excellent. Absolutely excellent.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is Jeannie.
Hiya.
Hello, Jeannie. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
So, what club are you a member of?
I'm a member of Wakefield Camera Club.
Right. So
over in the depths of Yorkshire.
You're a Yorkshire lass.
Aye.
Barnsley based, you said?
I am, yeah. Yeah.
And, if I've been judging and a horsey picture comes up, I always say, oh, that must be a Jeannie Lazenby picture. Is Lazenby the way you pronounce your surname?
It is, yeah.
Yeah. So are you a big horsey person?
Yes, I'm allergic to them, and I'm an obsessive. So what you can't have makes you want it more. I learn't how to ride with swimming goggles and became a very determined horse owner. I'm not a horse owner anymore, but I really enjoy working with them. So a lot of what I've selected has got the horse element tonight.
Right. Okay, well, your first image is on the screen there, so away you go.
Okay, thank you. This one has never been in a competition. It was one of the first images that I took with my daughter, and I had this idea of a story I wanted to tell, part fairy tale, part imagination, and the opportunity came up to work with some specialist horse trainers, and I managed to cajole my daughter to sit next to this beautiful white Andalusian stallion and read him a book on unicorns. So it's exceptionally special to me, almost to the level that I don't want to compete with it, but I just thought I wanted to share it really as the start of what fueled a lot of my work and took me a lot further along the same path.
Excellent. What was the title for that?
This is Once Upon a Time.
Once Upon a Time.
And the storybook is I Believe in Unicorns. So this image is probably what I'm most well known for. I started doing a number of equine workshops that became almost like equine theatre, and this was one of my workshop images, and it's been my first big winner. It's come home with so many medals. It made Master of Print, and it was my first year of competing. So to have an image in my portfolio that did so well, I was astounded. I've called it Shall We Dance. It is not a composite. My ballerina was in real time that close to the horse. I did have the horse trainer, Ben Atkinson, blacked up, tapping the horse's knee with his finger. But I suppose it's an image that I'll always be very, very proud of. And I just love the storytelling. I'm such a big storyteller, as you'll see.
Lovely.
This one is Bohemian Child. She's been out and competed and done well. She's done exceptionally well at the Fine Art Photography Awards and the Julia Margaret Cameron Awards for female photographers. And this is my little daughter, and I never knew she could do this with her tongue until I got her in front of the camera that day. And she's done a triple tuck with her tongue. I remember I took it and I had to zoom in and think, oh my gosh, what has she done? So this is sort of wrapped up with the love for your child. We had an absolutely excellent time styling and doing the makeup and just being generally really wacky. And I really do enjoy working with her. I sort of cut my teeth on the weird, strange things, and then I can go forth and use it with normal people. So this is Bohemian Child.
Excellent.
This is one of my favorite people to play out with. This is Ben Atkinson and his stallion Sebastian, and lots of real fire. We absolutely enjoy recreating stories again. And I found someone that I can work with that is as daft as I am. I come up with an idea and he comes back with a really wacky idea, and then we say, yeah, and let's light the fields and set it on fire, and just end up getting some really, really sort of cool shots of daft things. But I'm also a bit in awe of this guy, the best horse trainer I've ever come across, and an exceptional person to work with. I'm particularly lucky, I always think, to work with this guy. And the shots I get, again, no Photoshop, just, you know, big up, real good horsemen and really well-trained horses.
Who plats the horse's mane?
He does.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Did he do yours as well?
Well, I make a lot of the costumes, and I tend to decorate the horses, and he's got the most massive, like a hanger of costumes, because they do film work, and they provide a lot of horses for films. So they've got this hanger of film costumes, and I just want to be locked in. It's like, wow. A photographer's dream, really. Right, this is Wuthering Heights. I actually created this image for a camera clubman competition on movie titles or film titles. And I was very inspired by the pre-Raphaelite painters, and I've taken the pose pretty much from one of the paintings, and I've set her out on the moors, and I just wanted to sort of make a very thoughtful melancholy about it. But
Is it your daughter again?
It is. It's my mini me, bless her. I do shoot a lot of other people, but I think, again, when you're a mum, when it's your own kid, and it's done very well in competition, it makes it extra special. It pulls at my heartstrings a bit.
Yeah.
But she's the most fabulous little actress. You know, she's certainly plays for the camera.
There's a great sort of color palette going on there. The colors in the background just exactly mirror her skin tone, and the lilacs there and whatnot.
I really like color toning, and my background as a painter, I think I'm always looking for different bits and pieces to tone in. So yeah, I think my favourite colours keep coming back up though, and I do like this one. Right, this is Renaissance Madonna. This one made the 3rd Master of Print. I've been very lucky to have made 2 out of the 3. It sort of shouldn't have happened, this image. My model, Monica, she brought her little one with her who had no intention of going in any photos. And my daughter pushed around the garden in a pram and she refused to go to sleep. So in the end, she screamed so loud, all the neighbours were watching, and I had to scoop her up and give her to her mum. And instantly, she was completely pacified, and she just turned and looked at me, and my head just went, oh, Madonna and child. And the shoot just became all about their relationship together. And she's like a modern tough Madonna. It's not been the best competition image, but for me, it's just got such a natural strength and also that warmth about it. And again, I'm off on a pre-Raphaelite trip, I think, but I often am, so I'm okay with that. This is for He Is All That I Am. One of my favourite horse portraits. The stallion is Kai Kai Dazarkas, and he lives over in North Wales where I do some workshops. And I think what makes it special, he's very unusual, and I handmade him the head collar. I spent probably about 23 hours sewing to make him this wondrous sort of thing to wear that matched his eyes. And I sort of like doing that. I like to plan a shoot and to try and find something that makes it stand out or makes it special. And all this thing about big stallions, you scratch him under his chin, he goes to sleep on you. He's like a big dog. He's the most wonderful horse. So yeah, that's He's All That I Am.
The strength of the profile there of the horse's head is excellent.
He's very baroque.
Yeah.
He's just a lovely, gentle creature as well. This one is all about bullying and solitude and hearing voices. I did a series that was about mental health and about how you felt as regards other people talking to you and who controlled you. I do like setting myself little projects. I've gone off on a red thread of destiny before all the pandemic happened. And this sort of mental health project was the one before that. I'm an art teacher as well, and I've collected, I think I ended up collecting 22 dolls off my students, and I find them really quite scary. The sort of creepy things are dolls. But again, I just love telling a story. This is over in Manchester at an old falling down mansion. And I built the set and just sort of had my model, who's Kat Middley, create scenes with the dolls. I sort of asked them, you know, make them your friends, make them your enemies. And I looked for the narrative going through. But natural light, and I just like the detail and the story in this one.
Have you entered that one in salons? I don't think I've seen it in catalogues.
No one's seen it. This one's gone to the Julia Margaret Cameron Awards and the Fine Art Photography Awards, so it's not done Camera Club at all. And half of my mind tells me I'll have blown the highlights. That, you know, there'll be, you know, no detail in the shadow. Thinking about my Camera Club rules. So for me, it's more art, but I could try it. Yeah. I just need a bit of confidence to chuck it in the mix. So yeah.
You just crop in that little bit there on the highlight if it worries you there, and just
yeah, take that bit out. Yeah. This is Night Rider. This is one of my great friends, Catherine, and again, it's a workshop image. It was right at the end of a very long, very hot day. And we just started to get the sun at a beautiful angle, and she's riding a horse called Ockle. He is just absolute hell on legs. He's so feisty. He is just on the borderline of rampaging out of control, but she rides him so beautifully. And I remember shouting in my loudest voice, "Look back!" And just got the turn of her head as he belted back, back to his stable across the field. And I think I still have Black Beauty playing in my head from being a kid, and that freedom galloping over a hill thing. Just, again, the bit of storytelling.
You've just put the sound, the tune for Black Beauty in my head.
And I just love the way she's going one-handed as well.
Yeah.
Just
She
really
she looks very in control.
Yeah.
You can see the energy of that horse there. Like, he's a powerful big horse.
Well, when you play with stunt riders, I think 99% of the time they're not really in control, but they're not scared at all.
Yeah.
They ooze a calm, and normal humans would be terrified of the speed they move. But yeah, they're just fantastic people to play with for photography. They're just mad. This is Gilded Creatures. This is pretty much the last horse shot I took in March. I ran around with a Pritt stick and some gold leaf. The belt on the horse's neck is, I think it's from one of the charity shops. And I was going for half of a Russian feel. There's a breed of horse called Akulteki, and they have a special collar that they wear, the sort of silver and gold collars for their traditional harness. So my brain's trying to combine that, combining it with a gold prom dress, sprinkling gold leaf down the horse's neck, and just looking for an opulence. And then this moment happened. I mean, a classic portrait, she's looking at us, but she just listened to the horse, and he just heard something and looked away, and it was like a moment of silence, and I just loved it. I've bobbed a texture on, a little bit of colour toning, and again, it hasn't done any camera club competitions, but it's hit really pretty big on the arts competition, or the fine art photography, and it's just won me Fine Art Photographer of the Year with the MPA. So
excellent.
It's worked very hard for me, and it was worth the Pritt stick. It was a beggar to get off, but I think it was worth it.
That's your 10, is it?
Yeah, I think so. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jamie.
It's an honour to play out with you guys. Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you for participating. Now, William, have we got Bernard Garrity connected?
No, not yet, Ross.
Okay, so Bernard Garrity was supposed to be up next. He's unfortunately having Wi-Fi problems. He has gone for a drive to hopefully try and be able to connect on his phone. But so we will move to Dean Irvine next, if you're happy, Dean.
Nervous, but I'm happy.
So, Dean Irvine, you work in Jessop's here in Belfast?
Yep. It's not something I boast about, but...
You're a member of Catchlight?
Yeah.
And you participate in the BPE, not so much in the internationals, or do you do the internationals?
Internationals, I tend to do a little better with some of this stuff in international than in the BPE, but can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we lost you for a few seconds, Dean, but you're back.
That's okay. The sections are just... So you have enough to begin, or?
We're having sound problems with you.
Right. Okay. Is that any better?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Hopefully it doesn't continue. One thing about myself is I didn't want to be a photographer. I wanted to be an illustrator. I studied illustration and animation right up till college, until I had to do a photography module, and that's when it started. So the past couple of years, I've started to develop more of an illustrative style, whereas you see a lot of fine artists in photography, I'm more very graphic art. And I'll put this one at the start to show this. If I'm starting to dodge and burn something like this, I ink it like a drawing. This one, as you can see, on the shadows and the muscle, I toned everything. It's not a realistic light and shadow of it, but I tried to make the muscles pop, the arm look extended, things like that. It's just combining the style of, again, sort of comic book illustration with real life. That one's done all right for me. It's done okay.
Okay, you see that one?
Yep. I think a lot of ones in Catch That are probably sick of seeing this one.
So this is classic Tanya Irvine.
Yeah. The image is, this is a good friend of mine named Morgan, who I always joke is my muse or my lucky charm. Anytime I get a cracking image with her, it does well. And there's a few more of her in here, but I put this one in because it was in our World Cup winning panel, wasn't it, Ross?
It was in our World Cup panel, yeah.
Yeah.
Not the winning one, I don't think. I think it was the one of the...
No, it was the 2017 one. It was.
All right, okay, yeah.
But the reason I put this in is this was my first real attempt into fantasy sort of photography. Things like the skin tone hair. Morgan is bright red hair, so trust me, you see her coming in a dark room, hers up bright. But what I like about this is the idea that you don't know where you're going to get your elements for an image. The background is the Shady Brook Asylum for the criminally insane. So, which is actually from for a haunted house that I went to. But the whole idea was it was a winter setting. I had it in the back burner. I wanted to try some sort of fantasy ice queen type thing, and it just fit in.
Excellent.
Again, moving into more the comic book range, I am a huge fan of comic book and horror movies and things like that. So I tend to want to try and recreate characters that I find appealing. This one has done the rounds quite a bit in salons. It's officially retired now, but hopefully it'll be a part of a panel that'll be happening next year. Again, I would look up the artist's work of the character, see what's done, what's iconic, what you can spin on it. This one was actually based on a famous Batman cover with the Joker rather than Harley Quinn. But I looked at the pose and thought that could work. Take the elements that she's famous for and put it in. It's done pretty well, actually. Again, a lot of it isn't in camera. The skin tone, the blood in the baseball bat, that was all added afterwards. And that's down till, again, what you're working with. Morgan brought the costume, she brought the wig, but she has issue with face paint. So I couldn't put her in face paint without breaking her out. So that's one challenge with this sort of element of images, is how to create the realistic aspects of the character without them being there. This one I have William, our moderator, to thank for. It was a shoot he was dealing with. He was teaching me jail shots. Same again with it's the same gentleman from the first shot. William set up a brilliant thing to do jail lights. The blue and the orange were very, very light on the image. When I got it home, I tried to basically get it. Wasn't happy with it. So I went full mental with it. Again, inking, drawing, going into down detail, all the muscles, all the shadow, and then enhancing the colors. I really just wanted to create this aura of sort of Roman gladiator type, you know, the guy that's in the end of the bar that nobody messes with. There is a copy of this where you can still see the catchlight and the pupils in his eyes, but I wasn't happy with it. I thought the fact that you can't make out any detail in the eye adds to the intensity of it. Now, to be fair, this one, when I first put it up, Ross did say, watch the awards roll in. I'm still waiting on the awards for this one. It's only ever got acceptances. It's never won.
It was in the club's panel that won the IPF championship this time last year. So
yeah.
Now, this one, so just to explain to people who haven't seen this type of image, or maybe even some people who might be judging, etc., talk us through how the bunny rabbit gets into this picture.
Right. This is the epitome of what the idea of me combining the two elements of me. I when I was growing up, like I say, comic books were what influenced me into reading and drawing. But it was Who Framed Roger Rabbit that got me into animation. And I was sitting watching it one night and I wondered, could I recreate the idea of putting an illustration in with a photo? So TJ was lucky enough, she was a cosplayer who did Jessica Rabbit for me. Two of us got together, she explained the idea. She loved it, set it up, we posed it so that there was plenty of room on the left for him to go in. Once I got it home, edited it, done like normally, then Roger is drawn completely by hand, sketched on an A4 page, scanned, digitally colored, brought into the image, and then I have to blend the two of them together so it looks like the shadow of her is coming across his ears. He creates a shadow in the background. It's not done too well in salons.
I mean, I suspect a lot of people think, oh, this guy has used clip art or such. Like, this is actually hand drawn, digitally drawn by you and added to the picture, which is allowed under the rules.
Yeah, I did get an email from the Spanish salon asking me did I want to enter it after I entered because they were going to disqualify it, thinking that. But I decided to record the entire process. It's actually up on my YouTube channel, so you can watch the whole from start to finish of the object.
I've seen your video of you actually drawing it and colouring it in, etc. So,
yeah.
Talented guy.
I know this is one of your favourites, but again, comic book wise, I tend to look at and compose my shots based on artists that I admire and have been influenced on me. One of them is a man named Adam Hughes. He is basically, he's go-to artist for Catwoman. If DC want any drawings of her, they get him to do it. This was shot in your studio. Again, Joanne was in the cat suit. Background was added in afterwards. She's actually holding a book there because we couldn't get an actual police sign. So when I got home, I photographed a picture frame, some felt, and built it together in Photoshop. It's done pretty all right for me, but the main thing about that is I put it up on my Instagram, and Adam Hughes, the artist himself, found it and sent me a message about it. So there's all these medals in the world, but the fact that the pinnacle Catwoman artist loves this is good enough for me.
That's good enough for you. Now, this is a well-known salon image.
Yeah, and again, this was one that just dumb idea one night, sitting watching a horror movie, and I thought, can I do something like that? Looked up the costume, ordered it. Spoke to Morgan about it. She loved the idea. It's the good balance between the two of us. If she's a weird idea, I can say it's possible, vice versa. This was done literally 2 shots. Morgan put the cloak on and the mask so that every one of the figures has the same build as her, and then done the one stepping out. Literally edit the 2 separate shots, copy and paste, copy and paste, copy and paste.
What was the title for this one?
I named it Don't Fear the Reaper, and did enter it in a competition where it was based on song or book, and the judge marked it 7 because, in his own words, why would anyone be scared of her? She's beautiful. No, I think that one has had its day now. It's still one of my personal favorites. Yeah, this one I wasn't sure. I sent you 2 copies of the clown.
Yeah,
I wasn't sure
this one.
Yeah, this is a very Marmite image. I absolutely adore it, but I know so many people don't like it. This, again, the Insane Asylum Haunted House, this was taken at the same event. What this happened was, for about 3 or 4 years, I was the Odyssey Arena's in-house photographer for concerts. So I learned how to be in a crowd, handle a pit, take quick shots. This was a stage show where the gentleman in the clown makeup would have been on, taunting the crowd, killing people, things like that, all for a haunted house. And I was just snapping away, and all of a sudden he seen the camera, and he just leant forward and posed, which worked out absolutely beautiful. The background isn't there. Behind him was a lot of dancers, so they were cut out, and that was then placed into it. So technically it's a composite. But again, this is the one that won me my first medal in the Lantern Magica. My first ever medal winner for salon. But I stuck this up on Twitter, and the gentleman in the makeup found it, asked for a print. I sent it to him, and he sent me one back saying, I've got it now on my wall, and so does Mike. And it took me about a week to realize who he was talking about, and Mike is the creative director of Universal Studios Orlando, the gentleman that created the character. So again, it may never lead to anything else, but just the idea that some creative director in a big theme park has one of my images on a wall.
And you're working on an A panel with this sort of comic book.
Yeah,
type of...
I'm working on through that at the moment. The hard part is, as you can see, is coming up with ways of creating the characters, but making them look realistic and photographic. I could easily just go full fantasy route, but I don't want to do that. I want them to look like, obviously something like this isn't in camera shot. I have had people start complaining.
Take the David Sadler approach, and you do your photography for you at the end of the day, not to please judges. So don't lose your sense of individual style just to please anybody else.
No, I've got to that point now where it's the one about this one. The reason I put it in is this was done just. I was flicking through the books behind me, as you can see. I've got a wall in there, just deciding what they want to shoot. I need to find something. I think we had a competition in Catchlight that Wednesday, and I seen something that wasn't possible. So this entire shot was done in a day.
Where's that then?
The coat and chain is me. I'm actually standing in that against the wall in this very room. I marked out where my head would be on the thing, held a prop skull from Halloween, and then dropped it all into Photoshop. Added some textures, dodge and burn. The flames are actually foam images taken from my fireplace. And then just combined it all.
Are those the chains from my studio? No,
No, they are a Halloween decoration from an old costume that I have in my attic.
Holly.
Yeah, I'm not seeing it on my screen, but I know the one you're talking about. That is, yeah. One thing you'll notice with a lot of the images I put up here is, character-wise, I tend to go for very strong females. The male characters, I tend to go for the dark and gritty or the horror-based ones. But for the female ones, I've never been a fan of the damsel in distress. I just hate the trope. So everyone, Harley, Catwoman, Mira, they all have a presence. They're the ones that everyone's jaw drop when they walk into the room. This one, again, all done in Photoshop. Holly was in the studio. Everything she was wearing, the costume, the crown, that was all there at the time. The lake, the waves, the sky were all separate. Same with the rocks. Again, one of the greatest resources a photographer can get is going to a theme park. The rocks are from a Little Mermaid ride. The lake is from the lake outside Magic Kingdom. Waves were just taken from general sort of down the beach and things. Combining all these to actually look like an image is the hard part. I think that one took 3 days work, actually getting it together, making it look right. Is she too big? Is she too small? Does she blend right? Where's the shadows? Things like that.
What's the title of that one?
That one's Atlantean Queen. I do have another one in the works with the same character based on an underwater shot. It was meant to be in here tonight, but it wasn't quite finished.
Next, is that 10? No?
That's 10, I believe.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, excellent. Well done, Dean. So I saw Bernard Garrity appear there. Bernard, are you with us? Bernard, can you hear me?
Currently trying to unmute Bernard now.
I'm here, guys.
Well done, Bernard. Good man.
Sorry, I was going up to get my microphone here.
Okay, so Bernard Garrity, you're based in Dublin.
Yeah.
And you run Bernard Garrity Landscape Workshops, which is doing tremendously well here with certainly amongst the Camera Club fraternity, people traveling all over the world with you.
Yeah, thank God. Obviously, times are a little bit different at the moment. It's kind of tough for everyone, but I think I've been blessed with the clients I've had, that people are so understanding. You know what I mean? And I know we're all in the same boat, but it does mean a lot to someone when people are understanding and they're not like crying out for refunds and stuff. They're saying, "Listen, let's reschedule," all this kind of stuff. So it does, that gives you a boost, you know, through these tough times. It gives you a fierce boost and say, well, do you know what? This is tough. It's hard, but you know what? My clients make it a little bit better, and you know, just looking forward to being able to travel again. You know.
Well, I've been twice with you, so you're highly recommended. You had me over in Glencoe last year.
Yeah.
And then I had the day in Wicklow with you as well. So you are Mr. Action Man. You're non-stop. You're full of energy. And you keep your groups quite small on your trips as well, don't you?
Yeah, I do. Like, one of the big reasons I started my company was because to meet new people. So it's funny you call me Action Man and Mr. Energy and all this kind of stuff. That's fine, but that's only around other people. That's where I thrive most, because to give you an example, I can actually go and shoot sunrise by the beach here beside me if I want, and I have not taken my camera out of the bag in 10 weeks. And part of the reason that is it's nice to have a break. I've been building a new office and studio. I've started a new podcast. I've built a new website. But the other reasons is because I do prefer to shoot with people. I do prefer people's company and stuff like that. So that's why I'm so eager to get going and getting back into things. And that's why, thankfully, you know, I do good words from yourself, but generally there is good words from people. And it is because I'm most comfortable around people than on my own. And as I said, that's one of the reasons in general why I actually started the company in the first place, was to get to know more people, give people an experience, give them something to always remember with like-minded people.
And you started off with mountaineering, did you? And then moved into the photography?
Yeah, like, it wasn't mountaineering. Like, it was always into kind of, I suppose, borderline mountaineering. It was always wanting to be in mountains and challenge myself on hikes, you know, within reason. You know, like, I've never done any big mountaineering, but in general, it's just been like pushing myself to my boundary, to my limits of what I can do without ropes and equipment and stuff like that, you know. And then in 2015, I just went through a little bit of a tough time, and at the time you don't know you're going through a tough time, but I gradually started to realize something doesn't feel right. So I went to see my doctor, and he was like, well, tell me, his name was Bernard as well, and he said, tell me your interests and blah blah blah. So I was like, well, this is what I like to do. And he was like, mountaineering, like, you know, have you any pictures? And I said, no. And he goes, why have you no pictures of being up in the mountains? So he's like, would you not buy a camera? So that's literally how it all started then, with a camera.
Look where you are now. Well, look, your first image is up on the screen there. Hopefully you can see it. Yep,
I can see that, yep. That was an image taken in Senja, on Senja Island in the Arctic Circle of Norway. This was in, Jesus, when was this? Was it last year? It's actually so hard to remember. Do you know what it was? It feels like it was like 2 years ago now because of everything that's gone on. But this was actually as part of a 2-week Norway trip tour in January. And we had spent the last week of January in Lofoten, and we spent the first week of February in Senja. And this was my first time on Senja, and all the group that were with me had been to Lofoten with me the year previous. So they're like, listen, we all want to go back to Lofoten, but we want something a little bit extra. So that's how I come up with the plan. We'll do a week in Lofoten and we'll do a week on Senja. And Senja is just like absolutely so stunning. Like, there's not as many big compositions as there is on Lofoten, but what there is complete wilderness. So the house we stayed in, like, was just real beautiful and spacious, and it's self-catering, and you go outside and you have 5 feet of snow right there, and you have this little chalet in the garden, which we have the path dug out to it, and you can go into this chalet and you can sit around the fire in the middle, the pit in the middle, cook your food and stuff like that, you know. And then obviously shoot the northern lights and stuff. So that's the beauty of Senja, is it's so much wilderness compared to Lofoten. Like Lofoten is probably still my favorite place to go and shoot, but in general, Senja was great just for the wilderness. And this was an image that I loved from that trip. It just loved the lights here, the mountain, and obviously the you have the street in the foreground. And this was actually it was 3 images blended, and I'm sure you know yourself, Ross. So one was for the sky, and then one was for the mountains and the whole scene, and then we've one for the village. So the one for the village was actually shot 3 stops under, because otherwise there is even still a few little bits blown out that are just really, they're so hard to tone down. But I do think you need to keep that element of brightness there as well. But yeah, there 3 shots, because if I tried to do it all in one, it was just way too blown out. So that's why I done 3 shots and blended, just so I could get as maximum dynamic range as possible, you know.
Sky's unreal there in that one.
Yeah, it's incredible. Like the northern lights are just amazing. So this one here is in Iceland, and this was during Midnight Sun last year. And again, like Iceland is amazing. And funnily enough, I'm hoping to be in Iceland this time next month. And that's because in Iceland at the moment, they're opening up the borders on June 15th, but they're actually testing on arrival with same-day results. So at the moment, they've only got 7 active cases of coronavirus and have not had a new case in over a month. So they're opening up the tourism on June 15th, but they're doing the testing and stuff like that. So the clients are still looking to go, and it does all depend on the quarantine rules, whether they're lifted on June 18th for Ireland. So we won't know for another few weeks, but please God we can. But this was just in Midnight Sun last year, and this is a waterfall called Brewerfoss. And this was taken at 2 a.m. And that's because in the summer, this time of the year, it's midnight sun, where the sun can go down to the tiniest bit just below the horizon and pop straight back up again. So what it does give you is, it gives you, if you get good light or if you get good cloud detail and light in the cloud, it could last for hours on end. Also, the beauty about Midnight Sun in Iceland is literally you're out shooting sunrise and sunset when everybody's in bed. The sun could go down at, we'll say, 1 o'clock and come back up at 2 o'clock. And you've golden hour in between either side. So all your photographers are out shooting, but Iceland is so vast, you never see anyone. And then your tourists are all in bed. So that's the beauty about Iceland and Midnight Sun. And this particular place, we were completely alone, shooting from a lovely wooden bridge. And you can see this water. Like, if anyone that might follow me on social media and stuff, I do like to do Instagram stories. And I remember having a story up about this and people like replying about how blue the water was, even on the video. But you have the other end of it then, when people always say about the picture, say, was the water that blue? You know, maybe wasn't that exact blue, but in general, it was the bluest water that I've ever seen.
I've always loved this one. I didn't work it out initially that this was the light from his hat.
Yeah, so this was on myself, actually, a guy local to Johnny Baird. I don't know if you know Johnny, but Johnny, phenomenal photographer, really good friend, phenomenal photographer. And this was as we were, so if you, like, off in the distance, there's these little lights. Now, just past the lake, there's these lights, and that's where we started, from a place called Cronin's Yard. So if you just go up a little bit with the mouse, now come across left, there. So there, that's where we started our hike. And it was, so you can see the snow level we hadn't got snow there, but then we quickly got into it. But this was as I had just got up to the top of what's called the Devil's Ladder. And Johnny was still a little bit behind. So I just had a chance to basically set up my tripod really, really low, shoot Johnny, shoot quite a high ISO. You can see the dawn is starting to break and you've got your lovely blue hour stars. I had to shoot, I can't remember the exact settings, but it was quite a high ISO. And I was just saying to Johnny, just walk. just walk, and I was shooting very fast, and just as you see the light from the head torch, if you see what he's holding in his right hand, he's using the ice axe to actually walk up the rest of the Devil's Ladder. And it was just stunning. It was a memorable day. We set out at like 3 o'clock in the morning to summit Carrontoul, the summit for sunrise. We didn't actually get up for sunrise because we actually preferred where we were. But with this shot in particular, it wasn't until I got home and looked at my shots the next day that I realized I had the lovely detail in the bottom right of the foreground. So what went from like me taking a shot and not thinking much of it went from like one of my favorite shots that I've ever taken. And it's all because of that bit of foreground there, which I think leads it nicely into the whole photo.
Of course, the red jacket doesn't half help.
And the red jacket, yeah, like it all lines up, you know. So this is one then from the Copper Coast, and actually again one of my favorite images. And like the beauty about this image is at the moment can't be repeated because of the few storms that we had coming towards the end of last year. So all that water in the foreground and all the sand, so that's completely gone now. That's just like boulders everywhere and rocks everywhere. The sand is completely gone. So that's the kind of beauty of seascapes. It just changes all the time, and especially down the south coast or the southwest or the west, like with storms, it just changes so much. This was shot in August 18 on my way back from a Dark Sky Reserve weekend workshop down in Kerry. And it was a great weekend, and we just said, you know what, the conditions looked good. I had a couple of clients in the bus as well. I was like, listen, is anyone in a rush home? So they were like, no, we don't mind. And I was like, well, would anybody be up for staying down one more night and we'll go and stay in Tremor and we'll shoot the Milky Way? And they're like, no. So we all just split the cost, stayed in Tremor, went out, shot the Milky Way. We shot sunset, came back, got food, and came back and shot the Milky Way. So it was a good experience for them as well. But what I loved about this shot is, and it probably speaks for itself, it's just the rocks on the left and the right, just on the side of the frame, just the detail in them. And obviously the two rocks in the foreground with the water just dragging back out. And you can see then towards the stacks in the background, you can see kind of how wild the sea was. And you've just from the little bit of light hitting the stacks on the right was just obviously because the sun was setting to the right-hand side of the frame. But I love this. I love that detail in the rock, and I love doing the dodging and burning to really make it stand out. And again, it's kind of similar. It's a similar edit to the one of the blue waterfall in Iceland that we just looked at. So they are two of my favorite images because they were the skies in them, especially in the Iceland one, wasn't the best sky, but just basically with the editing power that you have in Photoshop, just brought the absolute best I could without going overboard. And it was the same with this. I've
never done the Copper Coast, so it's on my radar.
It is stunning. It's absolutely stunning. This shot of Dunquin Pier in Dingle is probably my most, in terms of a simple shot, very quick, knew straight away that was the shot you wanted. It's probably my favorite in terms of how easy it was to shoot. And it's just a simple 30-second exposure. Obviously, you've got the pier, coming down. It's a slightly different angle. You've got the two rocks in front of the pier. And then in the background, then just the left-hand side of the sun is the sleeping giant, or in Irish terms, on Far Morriv. And I had a Swiss group from Switzerland over, and we were due to leave Dingle that afternoon and go and spend the night in Killarney. It was just a complete day of rain, absolute rain. And they all wanted to go back to Killarney. So I said, listen, there is a chance that this is going to clear just in time for sunset, or, it might clear before or too soon or too late. But happened to clear just in time. The rain stopped. There was no wind because where we were shooting from was real grassy, real kind of bouncy grass. So to get a long exposure, you do need it to be completely calm. And thankfully it was. It was a 30-second exposure. Just all I had on was a polarizer and a 4-stop ND just to drag out the water and stuff. But there was no grad on. And the reason was because it had just stopped raining. The tones were so muted because of the moisture in the atmosphere that it was just this lovely glow. Not too much, not too little. And it was obviously originally a landscape shot, but thought the square crop just worked really, really well. And just for the simplicity of the whole image in terms of taking it, the edit, and the final image, it's one of my favorites.
Excellent.
This one is in Kerry again, and this is in Killarney, and this was taken last September. And I don't really know the name of the bridge, but I just call it the Fairy Bridge, and it's a stunning little bridge and a real pleasure to shoot. And for anybody that might want to know, I've no issue telling people where things are, but this is actually just on the way out of Killarney on the old Kenmare Road, and you drive up to the top and park and then walk down these steps, and this bridge is here. So it's really, really nice, really worth a shot as well. So what I did with this is kind of interesting as well, because the technique to shoot this, and for anyone that understands what a polarizer does, you know, and for people that might not, I don't know, but a polarizer helps cut glare and add vibrance. So here, I didn't want the glare it was cutting was preventing me from seeing the reflection in the water. So I was like, right, well, I want the reflection, but I also want the vibrance. So it was 2 shots, and the first shot was with the polarizer to allow me to get all the nice vibrant greens in the shot. And the second was without the polarizer, which allowed me to keep the reflection that I was going for. And then just a simple blend, put one on top of the other in Photoshop and create a layer mask and just brush out what I didn't want or what I wanted or whatever. Then in terms of processing was very simple, just kind of for a bit of a dreamy effect. I did add a glow to where the bridge in the background with where the bridge and the trees are, just in the arch there. Just add a little bit of a glow with a radial filter. Just to, as I say, and I've done the same then with the reflection. So I can't remember who, but I remember getting advice before when I started my photography, is that if you make a change in an image that has a reflection, change the actual top part of the image of whatever you want to change, but do not forget to adjust the actual reflection as well. So went with the radial filter on the top, but also went with a slightly, not a strong one on the bottom, but just enough to make a difference.
I have to collect James.
Okay, next one.
So I'm assuming most people know where this place is, and obviously Kirkjufell, the most iconic mountain in Iceland. And this was just, it was a stunning evening shooting in November 2018. And this was 11 shots, and reason being, 1 for the sky, for the aurora, and then 10 for the foreground. So I've done 10 for the foreground at a high ISO at 30 seconds. And that was just to basically to stack them in a program called Starry Landscape Stacker, completely just for noise reduction purposes. It was a stunning evening. We had the place to ourselves, so we had the time to really, really push, you know, what we wanted out of the shot. If you had other people there, you'd be afraid lights would be turned on and stuff, and you just have to get 1 shot, and it would be noisy. But in this situation, we had no one else, so. As I said, 10 shots just for noise reduction for the foreground and 1 shot for the sky. And I actually printed this one, and I was really happy with how it printed. It can be quite tough when it comes to the nighttime stuff, especially. So I suppose when Ross talks about me being into mountaineering and stuff, this is kind of it. So I always say to people get a bit afraid when I'm like doing talks and stuff, and they're like, how are we supposed to go on a tour? We can't go up here and stuff like that. 90%, 95% of my trips are for anyone. But then there's this one in Lofoten in midnight sun, and I'm actually supposed to be there next month, but that's not going to happen now, unfortunately. So we're going to postpone until next year. But this is just like, this is extreme kind of hiking. We camp, we hike, and we shoot for a week. And it is just amazing. We set up tent down at the beach down there, and then we go up and we hike the mountain for sunset. Now, sunset doesn't actually occur when we go. It gets close enough to the horizon and comes straight back up again. So it never gets dark. So once the weather is good, it's always like really nice and safe. This particular one, it was taken last year. And where I'm standing, you see that kind of the I suppose the curve in the foreground. So that was a 650 meter straight drop down to the beach. It was quite an unbelievable view, one of the most memorable evenings I've ever had shooting. A little kind of thing about this week was you're in the Arctic Circle. You know, this was the middle of July last year, and it was too warm to sleep in our tents. We had to sleep outside in our sleeping bags. It was basically what the weather's been like the past few weeks. That's exactly what it was like. It was 23, 24 degrees, and it made the experience better. The dangers of it then is I'd never really kind of camp on the beach there, but there was one tent down on the far side of the beach there under the big rock. And what happened was there was a rock fall the next day. Now, luckily, the rock fall occurred in the middle of the day. And that's generally when there's no one really on that part of the islands, because the only way to get there is by boat. So you're either going out on a boat in the evening to camp and shoot, or you're going back on the boat early in the morning. In between, in the afternoon, there's not much activity out there. So it was lucky there was no one on that beach at the time. So this is an image. It's a brand new image, only edited last week or the week before. And this is an 8-image panorama of the Milky Way taken in Tenerife in Teide National Park. And again, it's supposed to be in Tenerife last week. And absolutely, raging because we just don't get enough clear skies in Ireland. Tenerife tour is so handy, and the reason being is we only go for 3 nights, and we stay in an amazing hotel with like all inclusive, and it's really cozy. But we can shoot more Milky Way in 3 nights in Tenerife than we could in about 5 years in Ireland, or even 10 years even, because you shoot it as soon as the Milky Way comes up. From the horizon all the way till it goes literally vertical and beyond, and it's amazing to be able to do that, because in Ireland we're always like worried the moon's coming up, the sun is coming up, so you only have limited time. So not only with limited skies, you've only got limited time to shoot the Milky Way in Ireland, whereas in Tenerife you could shoot it for 7 or 8 hours every single night. So we wouldn't even get 7-8 hours shooting the Milky Way in Ireland in a year. So that's why it's so nice, and you can see the kind of foregrounds you get as well. So this, the on the left, kind of resembles a bird. So I just kind of wanted the Milky Way kind of arching coming out of the bird.
Yeah, I would love to do an astro shoot, so maybe get a Tenerife trip with you someday.
Yeah, 10% off online now for the next week, for next year. But so this one then from the Faroe Islands, and this was taken on a trip in Christmas week 2018, and we were there for a week, and it just rained solid for the whole week. But I came back with 2 images from that week that will probably always be in my top 10 or 15, and this is definitely one of them. And it was just so atmospheric. So them cliffs there, they're 60 meters high. At times the waves were bouncing up there and coming up over the height of the waterfall. It was just stunning. You can see by the motion in the water, and then you can tell it's wild, and then by the mood in the cloud. But in terms of the motion, that motion in the water, so what was happening was where I was standing, the cliff underneath was kind of undercut. So the waves were ferocious. They were hitting the cliffs in front of me, or that I was standing on, but not reaching up to me because it was undercut. And it would hit underneath, and then what would happen was the waves would just push away back towards the mountain. And that's when I was firing. That's when I was firing half a second, 1 second, 2 seconds, seeing whatever suited. I can't remember exactly what the exposure time was for this, but if you do notice the water leading away, it leads away, but it also leads to the mountain. And that's the kind of look I was going. Anyone that shoots seascapes will know you just keep shooting and shooting, and you hope to get a better one, and a better one, and a better one until you can possibly shoot no more. So this was the best I came away with that evening. And the mountain was actually covered. So you see the mountain in the background. That was actually covered for 90% of the shooting that evening. But thankfully, in the last kind of 10 or 15 minutes as we were shooting, it started to partially clear, and you can see the mood. Ross, if you just move the mouse up to the top of the mountain there, you can see just where the mouse is, there's little fins. It's like teeth. It's like there's these little teeth sticking out, and they're just in the mountain. Like they're just part of it, and they're just stacks. But when there's atmosphere and mood and cloud around them, They look like shark's teeth or something. So it'll always be one of my favorites, just purely for the thrill of shooting it, the excitement, seeing the waves, and coming away with a result that I was really happy with.
Excellent. I think that is your 10, Bernard.
Perfect. I enjoyed that. And I'm glad I was able to tune in.
Glad to get you connected.
Yeah, well, I hope everyone can see the images properly. I can't. They weren't showing up great on my screen, and it's just unfortunately down to the Wi-Fi.
My system is fully calibrated, so I think people have been commenting that the images look like they should, like they expect them to look.
Yeah, mine they look okay, but it's more so just the quality of them isn't great. And it's just due to my Wi-Fi is all, you know.
Yeah, it's very likely down to your internet there, Barrett.
Yeah, no, I've.
Okay, so we need Chris Palmer unmuted then.
Yeah, I'm unmuted.
Welcome, Chris.
Thank you.
I would say London. Are you London?
Northwest London.
Northwest London.
Greetings.
And you and I judged my first international together, which was Edinburgh.
Yes.
So it was good to have somebody who judges so much as you do sitting on by my side. I mean, I don't think I know anybody who judges as much as you do. You're fairly active on the circuit.
I try to be, yes.
So.
Good evening, everybody. It's nice to be with you, and I applaud Ross's initiative for this excellent idea, and I'm pleased to be finally taking part. I couldn't make previous dates because I was judging or lecturing elsewhere. So a lot of my photography is very quiet and probably non-competitive too. And this first picture was taken at a place called Independence Pass, which is just outside Aspen in Colorado. I was researching with a friend of mine for a potential workshop. And this sort of photography, I mean, the aspen trees are just beautiful, but you really need to be there under very subdued lighting. If the sun or brighter lighting had hit these trunks, then there's no way that the camera sensor would have handled it. And it's just vital that you get the quality into the picture. So camera, of course, is on a tripod. You turn autofocus off. You want to maximize the depth of field and be very careful with the exposure so that the highlights aren't blown. This is quite an old picture, but it's one that's always very dear to my heart.
I think you showed that one as a print when you came over to catch it.
Yes, I think I did. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a great depth to it.
Now, this picture took me about 18 months to take. By that, I mean that it's just taken just down the road from me, no more than half a mile from me here in Northwest London. And the actual road is the A40 that goes into London past Northolt Airport. And I would cycle past this and notice the graceful curve of the lights and thought, at night, that would be quite an interesting picture. And then the continuing thought was that at night, but in fog, it would be an even better picture. So it was took me 18 months to wait for the right conditions to finally get the picture that I wanted. And I was visiting my mother and father at that time. I remember it was a Sunday afternoon, November, about 4:30, 5 o'clock. I said, I've got to go and do some photography now. My father introduced me to photography. He said, what the hell are you going to photograph at this time of night? I said, oh, well, I've got a shot in mind. And having pre-visualized the picture, I knew exactly where the tripod was going to be placed in order to make this picture. And if you've got a recipe for a picture, I'm sure all the other experienced people who are online with me this evening will be aware, you need to take many. And I was pleased that I did, because only in this one picture is the bright light on the line on the right hand side of this picture truncated. So there was a car coming towards me just as I opened the shutter, and it is the abbreviation of that line that just breaks the symmetry in the picture and perhaps lifts the attraction of the photograph.
The fact that you're above, you're higher than these lights. Obviously, if you were lower, you're going to get the blown out bulb. So you're just at a perfect height to be above the street lights there. Yeah,
viewpoint is important, and positioning to get, relate and translate the rhythm of the lights as they go into the background. I'm very conscious that a lot of the people who are showing work today, this evening, are spending, you know, a lot of time. I think somebody mentioned 3 days. This picture needed no editing at all. That's more or less how it came out of the camera. I'm not really, if anybody asked me what sort of photographer I am, I think I would probably say I'm a location photographer, although I'm better known really for my landscape photography. But because I live in northwest London, I've had the opportunity of popping up to London quite regularly. And I could never work in London, it would drive me nuts. But I feed off the energy of London. There's always something happening, there's always something to go and see and do. And this was taken on a walk up Victoria Street with the Houses of Parliament behind me, walking up towards Victoria Station. And I spotted this man, the subject in the picture, and he was static looking into the window over on the left-hand side, and just in this shaft of light. And I was really excited and scampered up to get closer. And as I did so, he turned and moved away and walked. And I still shot it and was so pleased that I did. And I think actually he's given me a better picture.
This has an Irish feel to it.
Well, there's a nice little story here, and I'm conscious that probably we're fighting against time tonight.
No, go ahead. You take your time.
This was taken down on the Dingle Peninsula in a town called Castle Gregory. And I was with a fine friend of mine, Hugh Milsom, who's a wonderful landscape photographer, but we were just wandering around the villages. And I actually followed this man down the road, no more than 20 yards or so. And he had a newspaper tucked under his arm, and he stepped back through his open front door, and he turned and looked at me, and that was my opportunity. I said, "Just got the paper then?" He said, "You see the feckin' price of papers." He said, "I don't know why you bother." He says, "I share it with the guy next door, but there's feck all in it." And we were away. And so I had a nice little conversation with him. And then I said, "Can I just take some pictures?" And he said, "Yeah, sure." And I was very pleased with this picture, just retaining a sense perhaps of the background. It's a straight picture. The one regret I had was that I never found out his name until Ross kindly invited me over to Belfast to do a lecture. And during the interval, a lady came out of the audience and took a photograph of my print. I was quite flattered. What I didn't realise is that she had relatives in Castle Gregory, and she contacted me through Facebook subsequently. And I found out the name of this man subsequently, which was lovely.
Excellent.
I think many of us are influenced by people within our own club or the people that we mix with. And I'm sure Ross has been a very strong influence over what everybody's doing at Catchlight. But this really is a homage to Vic and Mary Atfield, who one or two members might be aware of. He's a member of my own club. He's still producing wonderful pictures, even at the age of 91. But a lot of his pictures feature dogs. This was taken in Barcelona, at the end, just in front of the Sagrada Familia in Barcelona, and it's called Siesta Time. And I just enjoyed the punctuation in the picture and the relationship between the two dogs. I assume the owner of the dog on the left-hand side is the man who's also enjoying a nap. But I was aware at the taking stage of the opportunity of including people, just legs in the background. So I was quite pleased with that one.
This one won a medal in the London Salon, isn't that right?
Yes, that's right. Yes, it did. Thank you for that. I should pay you for that later.
Are you a member of the London Salon now, Chris?
I am indeed, yes.
Yeah, welcome aboard.
Thank you. We saw some lovely pictures of Iceland previously, but a lot of my pictures are very quiet, very contemplative. And this, in a way, is quite an unusual picture for Iceland in that it was taken under very calm, tranquil conditions down on the south coast. And there is a particular area where, I mean, that strip of land in the top left-hand corner, if you go beyond that, you're into the open sea. So there's a beach there. But there is an area just to the west of this position where sea encroaches and floods this inland lagoon. And I just love this, the tranquility of this. But I was just so excited to find this triangular rock, which, when reflected, produced this strong diamond shape, which was a wonderful icon to balance against the promontory of the land in the top right-hand corner. And it just seemed to work well in black and white. Of course, you know, there's not a lot of colour in Iceland in many ways. It's a very graphic country, and that's what I was responding to.
Anybody else but you and I would say you photoshopped that rock into the shape of a triangle, but I believe you.
It's a straight shot. As is this one. And those people that don't you know, practice the true art of landscape photography perhaps don't necessarily always appreciate the amount of work that's involved in pulling an image together. I mean, this is in the iconic location of Elgol on the Isle of Skye, but it probably took me a good 15 minutes to find this rock. All the other rocks that could potentially have been used in the foreground were dull and uninteresting, but this wonderfully barnacled rock worked particularly well because it almost points the viewer into the picture and echoes in its shape the highest point of the mountain in the background, which is that's the Cullin Range in the background. Using a 10-stop neutral density filter actually simplifies the picture. It calms the sea and provides a cleaner link between the foreground and the background, and the framing inclusion of the elements of the rocks left and top right, I felt were quite important too.
Well, what time of the year did you take that one?
This was taken in May, but the weather, you know, up on the west coast can be so changeable. You just never know what you're going to get, really.
Yeah, I was there in January and it was just horrendous rain on Skye for several days.
That sounds like it. This is probably my most famous picture, and Bernard was talking about the Land of the Midnight Sun, and this was taken at 10:30 in the evening after a particularly horrendous day where the light was dead and there was drizzle and mist about, but no atmosphere, nothing that tangible to photograph, and we ended up in the nearby town of Hoop and had unusually for Iceland, because the food generally is good in Iceland, we had a bad meal. But when we came out at about 8:30, 9 o'clock in the evening, the light was wonderful. So we thought we were going to have to use it. So we whizzed back to Stocksness, where this picture is taken. This is in southeast Iceland. And we had an unproductive shoot of half an hour or so. And I can remember folding my tripod up, putting it into the back of the vehicle. But as I did so, I looked through the vehicle, through the windscreen, and saw these Icelandic horses coming up the road towards me. Of course, they're semi-wild. You can never entirely predict where they're going to go. But the camera was back on the tripod immediately, and I was so excited. And it's very easy when you've got wonderful conditions to forget about camera craft, but I was determined to nail this, and I was particularly pleased with this picture. As were Photospeed, who kindly support me, and I think Ross as well. And Photospeed used this image to launch a paper.
Excellent.
Every picture that you see so far is a straight picture, but this one is not. This is down on the Dingle Peninsula, again with Hugh Milson. And we had a wonderful dramatic opportunity with a real stormy sea, crashing onto this iconic triangular rock, and the light was really spectacular too. It was really challenging photography in order to nail the picture, but I was particularly pleased. Except in the background, in the original picture, there was a sort of rather pastoral scene of a few grazing cows in a field in the top right-hand corner. But elsewhere on that shoot, on that day, I took some pictures of some stormy clouds, and I've actually superimposed those, the element of that into this picture. So this isn't a straight photograph, it's a blended picture, but it actually captures how I felt when I fired the shutter. It's another one that was in the London Salon a while ago. And I thought I'd conclude with this picture, which is, again, very different. And it almost has a contemporary feel to it. But this picture, taking this picture taught me a lesson. I was lecturing down near Bristol to Portishead Camera Club, stayed overnight. The following morning I went to Clevedon, and there's a very elegant pier at Clevedon. And, but I couldn't get parked. But I saw some signs for some sea pools, sea bathing pools. So I made my way over there and did some black and white pictures of the posts and the sea pools themselves down where these ladies are standing. And as I was doing so, I was aware of a lot of chatter, and turned around and noticed all these ladies gathering and taking their clothes off. And I realized what was going to go on, so I quickly packed up and climbed up a flight of steps and waited. And sure enough, it wasn't too long before they gathered and took their... It was freezing cold. It's called winter dip. I just had one opportunity of firing one picture just when they formed this rather graceful S-curve to carry the viewer into the picture. And I was so pleased that the lady in the foreground was just adjusting her costume too. So sometimes when we go to a location, we go with preconceived ideas about what we're going to shoot, but suddenly an opportunity presents itself. And this is a new picture, and it's just won me a gold medal, so I'm quite pleased about that.
Excellent. Yeah, you mentioned the S-curve. I was just about to comment, you know, when your eye sees a curve like that, you just can't help but following it right round.
Absolutely.
And of course, the great colours there as well, and all the costumes. Is this a guy here?
Yes, it is. Yes, he's the only gentleman amongst these intrepid ladies.
brave man.
Yeah, I wouldn't have gone in there. So anyway, thanks very much for allowing me.
Thank you very much, Chris. Excellent. So next up is Gerald Gribbon. So most of you watching will know Gerald as a subject. Gerald, are you unmuted?
Yep.
Gerald.
Hopefully now, yeah.
There we go. So if you can lower your camera a wee bit, we can maybe see you, and maybe some other people will recognize you from being a male model for my workshops. Give us the Gerald look, as if I'm standing in front of you now with a cap. There we go. There we go. There's the Gerald look. So, Gerald Gribbon, member of Cat's Leg Camera Club.
Okay, thank you very much, Ross, for that introduction.
Photoshop wizard.
And following on from Chris, I don't think you'll see anything that's a one-shot, natural shot coming up.
Is this not a straight shot here, no?
It is in my mind. I suppose all I can really talk about is how I do the thing, rather than, because if I talk about how I think of it, I don't think anybody would quite understand. And if they got into my brain for 10 minutes, they might not get out. So the idea basically here was I had a fairy pixie sort of shot that I had taken, and I wanted to develop that, and the little tweak on the ear, leaves for hair, and playing around them. But I had a cloudy background, but I didn't really like the cloud, so the background that I ended up with was actually rhododendrons, and I liked the blueness that was coming out once I had done a couple of blend modes, probably a difference blend mode for that particular one. The rope was around her neck originally, but I thought it was a bit stark, so I wanted a scarf idea, and the only thing that I could find in my stock was a graffiti wall that I thought would work, so that then was added in to give it this glowing scarf effect. I also want, sorry?
Good play on the blue and orange on the colour wheel.
Yeah, and then I played around with the eyebrows a little bit and the lips, obviously, to make them stand out with a bit of interest. But I also wanted some, she had a tattoo or two, and I just wanted to play a bit more with that. So the little dots over the shoulder are a seat that was in the waiting room of a Ford showroom. So I have a habit of shooting strange things everywhere, which will appear somewhere, but where they are going to appear is only in my
Nobody
mind.
knows. Next one. So good title for this one. What is it?
This was, I think it was called Brexit Revenge, was it?
Brexit Revenge, yeah.
Yeah, it was around the time of Brexit, obviously, and all the things that were going on. And then we'd actually got to the point where we had left or were going to leave. And the guy with the Union Jack and the scythe was all shot in a graveyard, actually, in an abandoned church. But I didn't use the graves from that graveyard for this particular image. And the nun wasn't really supposed to be part of the picture. It was just him coming out of the graveyard and having his own revenge, but it looked a little bit blank and I needed something. So with a little bit of searching through the archives, I found my nun that I had and added some stars to her cassock and kept it pretty low profile with the colors, and I think it worked okay.
Yeah, certainly did. So this one was scored 15 out of 15 in the print championships, I think, last year, and also got a medal in the Irish Club Championships this time last year.
Yeah.
On a textured photo speed paper.
Yeah.
So, Butterfly Rescue.
Butterfly Rescue, yes. This one is probably one of the only ones that you will see with medals or awards, because I don't enter an awful lot, although I do get encouraged to do so, but I get more joy out of actually making the images than doing anything with them. And if one person likes them, that's good enough for me, especially if I like them. The original shot of this actually had no field, and it just was, her hanging in the air was just a little bit unbalanced for me. So I had shot some poppies with a friend, and I thought, yes, that will do. But then I changed the colors of the poppies to match the butterflies. And the model was originally shot with the idea of a magic act, and the girl was supposed to be floating within this levitation. But that idea went completely out the window, and it turned into this. A lot of my ideas have probably come from things that you see subconsciously everywhere around, and I would look at a lot of artistic stuff. I would look at a lot of surrealism, especially, and that's where I like to be.
The green and purple were, I call them the Wimbledon colours.
Yeah, I have another version which is a rustic red version, but I don't think you liked it.
No, this one, as you know, just was.
Yeah, and the butterflies, I think, are actually, it could be moths actually, I can't remember, but they are pinned in the museum somewhere. So.
Excellent. Yeah,
as I say, you have to shoot things when you have the opportunity, and sometimes when you're cutting up your fish for your dinner, you think, I could do something with that. And this one's a later, I think there's one coming up later on, but which was done before this one. So I had the fish obviously in my archives. I've been playing with the bath for a completely different idea, but I'd been looking at some Dali stuff and started to play around. And the thought of the idea of the fish having a bath and the other fish queuing up to have the same bath, just, it was funny in my head, so I decided to get going on that one.
What was the title for this one? Have you got a title?
I think I just called that one Fishy Shore.
Yeah, we've got to get a better title for that one. Bath Time or Fishy Bath Time or something. Somebody's come up with a good title for us. So these are the elements that created this image. So if we look at the image first very briefly, here's all. Do you want to talk us through the elements before we go? Yeah,
I just, it is 10 of 10, but I sneaked this one in for 11 because I thought I could talk about them all night, and you would never really get the understanding. So, if we go around, Ross, with the mouse, you can see there's the sky and some rocks here in their left-hand corner, which are the bases of the foreground and the clouds in the sky. That is, I think, Edinburgh, which is up there. The next rock along is Krabi just off the coast of Thailand. The tree next
that in?
Sorry?
And where does that appear in the picture?
That'll be the top part of both the islands, yeah.
Right.
I might have turned it upside down. I can't remember now. But that's the top part of the islands. Then the tree is just the best cutout I could get of a tree. And then it was stuck on the sides of the island.
Holly.
The girl then was just a model shoot. Very simple shot. There was nothing special about it.
It's not Holly, is it? Sure, it's not.
No, it's Laura somebody, I think.
Right.
Haven't seen her since. I only did the one shoot with her and never saw her again. The carrot is out of Stuart Anderson's allotment. So he particularly dug it up for me because I wanted one with all the straggly bits on it. And when you go to the shop, they don't really have so many straggly bits. The car is taken from a retro museum in Bangkok. And I did a little bit of coloration and so on to get it to look a little bit old and abandoned for the shot. That's just a close-up of a bit of the carrot. That's in Abbey, which is about 20 miles from Belfast.
That's on that one?
That's on that one, yep. And just the next two are just other parts of the landscape to blend it all together.
So that all gives us that.
Then I played around with color tones and so on and so forth. Dabbled in and out to try and make the thing come together. It's one of my particular favorite ones, although I'm not sure that it would do anything anywhere because it's just maybe too much for them.
Well, as I always say to you, Gerald, there's only one way to find out.
It doesn't bother me. The story behind this is I had seen something like this before and thought, yes, I could do that. And I could do it in my own style in a different way. So off we go to the zoo. And someone mentioned earlier on the orangutan. And the original story is we went to shoot the rhino, not the orangutan, but the orangutan was there. And so many people have done so many things with it. And even I've done a few things myself. But I've a couple of different versions of this rhino, but this one is one of my favorites because I'm not sure whether I come up with the title or somebody else, but the gentle touch just sold it to me on the idea. And I do like playing with the idea of the juxtaposition of the model height with the height of the rhino, with it being a completely different scenario. And as we speak about the orangutan, this is the famous orangutan from Dublin Zoo that everybody likes to go and have a go at.
This mural is well known in the centre of Belfast there.
Yeah.
And
as soon as I saw the mural, I knew I had the orangutan photograph and decided, yes, that's going to go in there. And I called it Selfie. So it didn't take very long to do because all I needed was the orangutan cut out and put in a few spray cans. I left the writing. I know everybody talks about taking writing out of pictures, but I think it just says something about the whole story of the wildlife disappearing and that sort of thing. So that's why I left the writing in.
What was this one called?
Selfie.
Selfie.
Coming back again to that fish that you saw earlier, you just have to sort of prise its mouth open when you're taking the picture. And it's the same fish. And it was very tasty, to be honest with you. The teeth are completely drawn. There's no way a mackerel comes with that sort of teeth, although they do have little sharp ones. Took quite a while doing the splashes and so on, because you footer and you play around and you take them off and you put them on, you change the blending modes until you get fed up really, and then you decide, yeah, you know what, I've got enough. And again, the eye was a bit hard because obviously the fish is dead and it needs to look a little bit of life, so you have to paint and play around a little bit till you get a little bit of shine coming back, because it did look a bit dead at the start. Zoe is the girl on the rock. Shot in Catchlight Studio with the idea in mind that she would look away knowing that I was going to put her on this rock eventually.
Put in quite a hard shadow there.
Yeah, I think I decided to go with a hard shadow because the light's so bright on the rock. But easy change it. The seagull, I didn't really know. I took it in and I put it in, but I thought it told a little bit of a story that she isn't that far off from land that she couldn't be rescued. Whereas if she was just in the middle of nowhere, there was no chance that anybody was going to come to rescue her. So
I think she was rescued because she's just had a baby. I think so. Fredo.
Fredo, everybody knows Fredo and loves Fredo, and everybody knows why, because she's just a terrific model. I did shoot her in that sort of pose with the idea in mind that she may be some type of scarecrow-y thing, and especially with the long fingernails. But I never had the right background that I wanted of a field that really worked for me in my head. And again, I was out with another member of Catchlight, and we were actually shooting a beach with some nice coloured rocks on it. And I turned around and that field was right behind me. So I climbed over the wire and got it sort of more or less evenly shot up and down, and knowing that was going to be the scarecrow field, because obviously it was protecting the polythene and so on. But is she really protecting anything? Because she looks like she's having fun rather than actually scaring them away. And there's not one of those crows is real, just in case anybody wants to look at it closely. They're all photoshopped. Yeah, this is the one that nearly broke the will to live. I think Adobe Photoshop had an image similar to this as one of their opening images for CS4, CS5, something like that. And I saw it and I thought, how did they do that? I want to do that. So I tried and I tried and I couldn't get my head anywhere near it. And then I found a tutorial which did it. And I followed the tutorial to the best of it. Obviously using my own bits and pieces rather than the bits in the tutorial, which probably was my first mistake, because the tutorial obviously had elements you could play with. But I persevered and persevered and persevered, and eventually I come up with this. But it nearly broke me. It nearly made me give up, because that 4 shape is an absolute nightmare to try and create. And I would advise anybody who loves doing Photoshop not to try it, because it may just put you off entirely. But on the other hand, if you can do it, then you'll know you've achieved something really not easy to do.
Channel 4 had some emblem like that, or
yeah, it's based on their sort of 4 symbol, but I think it was Adobe had it as one of their opening.
Adobe did have it for Photoshop, Gerald. I think it was CS6.
Some CS5, CS6, one of those two. Yeah, I can't remember which one.
Just before they went to subscription base.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, because I think Kate Snigg is on the first one that they went to CC. Yeah, that's where I saw it originally and thought I have to have a go at that. So
I only remember because I held off going to CC.
That's your 10.
That's my 10.
Well done, Geraldo. Next up is Gabriel Chauvet from Dundalk. So I'm sure lots of you know Gabriel. He has judged a lot for the PAGB, for the likes of the print championships. Gabriel, are you there and unmuted?
Yep, can you hear me, Russ?
Yep, we can, and we can see you now as well. So
Worse again.
So how's lockdown on Dundalk?
Yeah, lockdown's going okay. I have to say, enjoying the little bit of extra time I have to try and reach Gerald's standards in wacky Photoshop. I'm coming up with some nice creative ideas. And getting used to some new technology in Photoshop. New to me, I should say. So it's I'm using the time wisely.
In your study there, where you've got your print reel, you've got some prints up. Is that in your own work, or is that a club panel, or?
No, that's my own stuff in the background. Yeah, we've been having Zoom nights with the club in Drogheda, and so I just changed them around now and again just to change the background. That's how they happen to be there.
So you have been a long-standing member of Dundalk. You were a member of Dundalk when they won the Fiat World Cup, and you've now gone to you've done what, a year or 2 years in Drogheda now?
Yeah, 2017. Yeah, so 2.5 years there now. I'm enjoying it.
Most people in the UK will know you fairly well because you've judged a fair bit for the you did the Masters of Print judging, you did the print championships, etc. a couple of times, and you did some of the internationals. So I don't think people need to know. They already know all about Gabriel O'Shaughnessy. You've been a master of Fiat you were probably a master of Fiat before I picked up my first camera.
Fiat was 2011. Yeah. I'm roughly 24 years taking pictures now, so quite a while. It's actually it's a little bit scary when you think back, start counting the year. I always know when I look at my oldest daughter, because it was around the time she was born that I went along and done the beginner's course in Dundalk, and just fell in love with photography. So
well, hopefully the same on the screen there. Your first image is up.
Yeah, just before I start, if I may, I just want to give a remembrance really to John Donaghy. I'm not sure that you would have known him, Ross.
I got today. This morning.
He's a stalwart member of the IPF and Mallow Camera Club, and just fondly remembered by anyone that knew him. I'm sure he was an absolute gentleman. So responsible for setting up the first website on the IPF and that. So just want to remember John. You know, like. Everyone, I think, trying to decide on 10 images is always tricky, and I didn't know whether to go 10 of what I'm doing now, and I thought maybe sort of a retrospective might be a good idea. And I started off with this one. This is called Jack and the Lady, taken back to around 2004. And when I set up in this house, I'm a gas fitter by trade, and I came to do some work to fit a boiler here. Had no idea who was behind the front door when I, arrived to fit this boiler. And Jack answered the door. I said, "God, there's a picture in that guy." And then when I went out the back, I seen this door here with all the paint. I said, "Gee, Mark, look at the door." And I was thinking, how am I going to get this picture? And he got a sort of a lease of life by having two new people. They're quite elderly. And he says, "I'm going to, here, Gabriel, I'm just going to strip down that door and sand it and get it painted." And I had to come clean straight away. I thought I had a couple of days to work up to asking him to pose, I had to ask him to hold off on the door, and he kindly did. It turned out he was a member of the old Dundalk Camera Club in the 40s, and he remembers it closing down for the war. And he said they used to meet in a hall called the Conrad na Gaeilge, which was it's a hall that's still there in Dundalk. And at that time, that's where they met. And on that very week, I think this was on a Monday morning, and on that Thursday night, the club was actually moving into that same premises. So there was a great connection with this image, and that was one of the reasons I chose it. So this was part of my RPS panel back in the day. Next.
Her expression is priceless.
Absolutely brilliant, yeah. Yeah, she just makes it. Yeah, I thought I couldn't show a set of pictures without including some of my old Irish cottages. And I was in the company of the gentleman, some of our English guests, like David Wheeler, Dr. David Wheeler. He came over to do a talk, an end of year talk, for our club. And we, you know, as we do on the Saturday, we went out hunting around the old houses. A lot of, especially the English speakers, now when they come over, they like to see some of these houses. Getting harder to find. But this was actually my first time in this house as well. And downstairs in a room, the ceiling had fallen in, and it was a beauty board ceiling. And it was still attached at one side of the room, but the other side of the room, the whole ceiling was on the floor. Well, we lifted it and propped it up, and it revealed a whole set of these chairs, 6 of them. And the old picture on the wall, I have to confess, we had that holy picture with us. And so we all took our own different shots. But this was my composition here, set up the 3 pictures, and just tilted the picture just to, I suppose, to break sort of the almost otherwise, you know, symmetrical feel in this triangular shape. I think just tilting the picture kind of forces the viewer's eye a little bit more. It was a very successful picture for me. And it led on to me doing a fellowship eventually in the Royal URPS on this genre. So that's why I included this one. That's called Trinity. This picture here, this one, this gave me great satisfaction. You mentioned I think Dundalk winning the World Cup in 2010, and this was one of the images, and got the silver medal that year as well with this one. And what I love about this, that's my daughter on the bottom and her friend. They were set up here at home. I have a little studio that I'm sitting in here at home. So I posed the 2 girls with the Hessian, and that strong diagonal. I kind of have this compositional brain in my head that I always kind of look for in an image if I can, and I think that's what gives this the strength, along with the expressions, of course. But what pleased me most is my wife is behind holding up that Hessian, and my other daughter, I have 2 daughters. The other girl, Kira, is just out of shot. And she's using a hairdryer to create some movement in the hair to give that sort of wispy effect that you see on the hair there. So other than that, it's a straight, you know, it's really about the concept of this picture. There's no photo. It's a straight studio picture, but it's done really well. And it went on then I got an email from the PSA, the Photographic Society of America, to enter it because it won awards, but I entered in their print of the year, or whatever they call it. And it went on, and it won that as well. So it was a great picture that involved the whole family, you know.
What was the title of it?
I called it Orphans.
Orphans, yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Okay, next. Yeah, this is the girl that was holding the hairdryer, Kira. My greatest critique now, David. Our dean earlier said he's an animator. This girl is now an animator as well, and she's creating some lovely work. And I like to ask her to throw her eye over my pictures. Dave was talking about shadows and light, and so I've learned so much from Kira, you know, about lighting and shadows, and I'm eventually slowly getting the hang of it. But this again is straight picture. Put the dress on and put the cuts in it afterwards with a blade and a load of talcum powder. So there's no Photoshop here at all. It's just a straight picture. And it's a picture again that there's, the reason I included this was the one and only time I've won with what we call Image of the Year in Dundalk. So they used to call me the Jimmy White in the club. I'd won everything except the photographer of the year in the club. So I was a happy chappy the night that this got the best image. Yeah, so that was Kira. And the funny thing about this was chosen for an art exhibition, and subsequently I was asked to write a caption about it. And I sat down looking at it, and what am I going to write about it? And I wrote in this. the angry teen taunts the viewer as she threatens to harm her once treasured past. So it was very deep. And when I was down at the exhibition, this arty guy come over to me with his spotted dicky bow and everything else, and he was remarking how I was able to portray my thoughts in this picture. He didn't realize it was the other way around, you know. So that was clear. I do like to do a bit of travel. I haven't done much in the last few years. The girls are going through college and stuff, so we're just coming out the other side of that now, which is great. So hopefully now when this pandemic settles down, I'll be able to make a few journeys. There's nothing added, nothing taken away here. It's probably one of my favourite travel pictures. This was a fascinating room taken in Trinidad de Cuba, and this house was situated up near the, sort of 3/4 way up a hill, and the Spanish, when they were there, built this house, so it was quite a well-to-do property, if you like, especially back in the day. And you can see all the artifacts around. There was 2 pianos and a pool table in this room as well, and this lady was the cook. So I know I spotted her and the tones and the colours that she was wearing. It's just going to really be nice out here. And I asked her to come up to the front room, pose for the picture. The croc, as you can see, this was a family pet, and it had died, and you can see the claws are missing there. The only real Photoshop that's done here, it was painting a bit of light back in on the teeth of the croc. So I had to kind of just brighten them up, because that area was within the mouth of the croc was a little bit dark. And so yeah, that was Cook in the Parlour, I call that one. Yeah, this is a fun shot here. This lassie was working in her house, servicing the gas boiler. She's a student, was at that time, and I had this idea. I was judging a salon somewhere, and I seen a photograph of a black girl portrayed almost with white skin, and I wanted to do something on that, not copy it by any means, but it just gave me this idea, and I could see this picture before I took it and set it up, but I could never find the right model. And then this day I'm just at work, and lo and behold, this girl is sitting there studying at the table. So I had to ask her, did you ever do any modeling? She was a wee bit skeptical of me, a bit dubious, and explained to her that I'm a photographer. So I gave her a card, and I said, I'd love to do a portrait of you, and we have a night in the club coming up the following week. And she probably looked up the club, and there's not much of me online, but she said, yeah, she'd like to come down. So I rushed off. I got this hood made. I had the jewellery, I have a box of that here, and I took her down to the camera club, and everybody enjoyed photographing her that night. I just took one picture. This is it. Set her up with one light. And my haste to get the cloak, the lady who takes up my trousers and stuff, I bought the fabric and asked her to make me a cloak. And I forgot to ask her to include 2 holes for the hands. So when I was putting the garb over her, I said, Jesus, yeah, I couldn't get it to sit. So I had to get her to hold it. And then I noticed the long fingers and the quite defined knuckles and fingers that she had. So then it was just a matter of using the hands as a prop. Because they're always a problem. I know there's a lot of portraits will tell you the hands are a problem. But here I decided to make a feature. And again, it was a picture that was very successful. It won the best image in the biennial and ended up on the cover at the Fiat Biennial magazine that year. I think it was hosted in Smedic, if I remember correct.
Have you put the catchlight in there?
That they're probably natural, I'd say, yeah, because it is studio lit. I did add the golden makeup above the eyes. I done that in Photoshop, and then just these shots rated the skin tones. They have that sort of monochromatic effect that I was after. What
was the title of that one?
That's just called Ibs. That's her name.
Ibs, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I'm not really a landscaper, but I do really enjoy getting out in the landscape. Bernard spoke passionately about the landscape earlier. and I'd love to go on one of the trips with him. I'm not sure if I'd have the energy, but I could. If I start training now, I might be fit enough again. Again, this whole pandemic is over. Yeah, a lot of people. This will be known to a lot of people because it's been photographed quite extensively. Unfortunately, it's gone now. The high bad storms we had about 5-6 years ago just whipped it. I was lucky that I had been before. And I'm down to this. It's quite a walk. Anyone that knows where it is, it's quite a walk from the car park. It's down the coast of Kerry, Glen Bay, and I had to go down there 4 mornings in a row to get the tide in the right place. That water is literally only 6, maximum 12 inches deep there. So it's taken at sunrise. So either the tide was in too far or not far enough, and I had worked out that it'll be perfect next Tuesday. And unfortunately, my holiday was coming to an end on the Monday. So I had to ring my brothers. One of the benefits of family business, said, listen, lads, I'm going to stay an extra night. And I stayed the extra night and went back down on the Tuesday morning, and it rewarded me with that picture. So I was very happy. Again, that actually got the silver medal that year in the PSA thing that I mentioned earlier. I don't really shoot for medals. I'm not mad into salons and all that sort of. I do enter them just to keep my interest going. It's just I find it so gratifying thinking and taking pictures. I just love producing. I kind of want to get them produced to the way I want them and the way I feel about them. I'm kind of happy, and the awards then they're kind of secondary.
Yeah. You have that as a print on your wall still in your living room? I do.
Yeah. Yeah. It's one of my favorites. This is another picture I really like. And again, that diagonal is, even though there's only one person in the picture, you can still create a diagonal that's running through, and I think it gives it a good strength as well. I think when you can get that in a picture, it always has. Again, nothing really added or taken away. It's just dodging and burning and stuff with this. Well, I say nothing taken away. I did strip back the colour from her skin to create that porcelain effect. And then I probably increased the saturation in her eyes and painted on a little bit of rouge on her cheeks there, and that's basically all there was to it. The girl herself, she's just photogenic, and it just managed to capture that expression, which worked really well. I don't enter the London Salon that much. I'm not even sure if I've entered it since, but that got a London Salon medal that time. So I do enjoy the London Salon. I thought this year's Salon was absolutely brilliant. I really enjoyed the commentary this year. Anyone that hasn't seen it, it's well worth an hour of your time to view it. It's very, very good. Okay. And this is possibly the last one. This is taken, as Ross mentioned earlier, I'd be over and back to the UK quite a bit, doing a bit of judging or going to various events and that. I'm also a permajet lecturer. I'm kindly sponsoring my paper, and all my stuff is produced really for print, not for screen. I'm starting to learn the merits now of sharpening a bit more subtly in that for the screen. And last week's talk, I think Ross were talking about the dimensions 1920 by 108, 1020, I think it was. A good size for doing online stuff and that. But this is taken in the Black Country Museum. Again, just a grab shot, if you like. There's a little church there, and they were exhibiting some dresses up on the old altar of the church, and there was literally a queue of people coming in the door, which is on the right hand side as you look, and then they were exiting through a door on the left hand side. And there was 3 members of this family. There's a girl just sitting out of frame, but I just spotted that sort of strong diagonal, between the 2 sitters, and given loads of space to the top of the image. So compositionally, it probably shouldn't work, but I think it really works well, because that line does carry up into the top corner. And for me, it worked very well. ISO here was very high. It's taken on, I Fuji XT1. So there is a little bit of noise, but it kind of looks like a traditional print, especially if you see the actual print of it. It would actually pass for a wet room print. That's one of the things I really enjoy about it.
Oops.
Oh yeah, we had one more. No, that's it. Okay, Ross, we're good to go. This image here, Gerald was mentioned earlier about that figure 4 breaking his heart. And this is nowhere near as complex as that, Gerald. But, I know what's like to get your heart broken because this looks so easy, and it is anything but, because there's so little in the image, getting the room to look right and getting the shadows to fall right. And when your daughter's an animator telling you, no, go back, do it again. So eventually I got it to where I wanted it. And then this is the beautiful Mishka. And I love, some people don't like the movement that's on her hands. But I like it because it brings it to life for me. So, that's one of these things that you like or you don't like. But when I had the image done, I was saying, how did she get in there? How did she manage to get into that room? And I decided I'd add a ladder to make it. And I went to the trouble of making a ladder. I didn't have a wooden ladder. So I made one out of matchsticks, glued it and everything. I had great fun for an afternoon making this ladder. And then I photographed it on that rail you see behind me. And it just didn't look right. So I ended up having to draw the ladder. So that was another day's work, getting the ladder. But I was happy with the end result. And it does well in the salons and stuff. So I've since been working since the lockdown. I've taken out the back wall and I've put in a sky there. And I was down in Ross's studio there. Ross, you might remember before the lockdown, March, with Clodagh. And I took a whole sequence of pictures there. And they are sitting very well into this room. There's a lot of work in getting the shadows to fall. So this is kind of on the creative side of things, where I mentioned I'm trying to learn and brush up on my skills. So thanks to everybody who's gone before. I've really enjoyed it. And thank you, Ross, for the invitation and the initiative.
Gabriel, I presume when you print this, that's on a textured fine art paper?
Absolutely, yeah. And I mount in that line that you see there on the outside the stroke. I don't include that. I bring the mount in on the image, because when you mount it and you show the white and the line, there's just too many lines. So it's much simpler and cleaner when I come in on the mount.
Okay, thank you, Gabriel. Regards to Maureen.
Thank you, Ross.
So next up, who have we got left? We have Julie Walker from Keswick.
Good evening, Ross.
Good evening, Julie. How are you?
Good evening to everyone there. I'm very well, thank you. And can I just say how much I've been enjoying listening to everyone talking about their photographs. A fantastic show of photographs.
So you've swapped seats with Alan now?
I have, and hopefully you can hear me okay.
Yes,
Good.
So you're also a member of Keswick Club?
Yes, indeed.
And you do a lot of travels, the pair of you?
We do, mainly doing wildlife photography. Like Alan, my main interest is wildlife photography, but I experiment with a lot of other genres as well.
And you and Alan are both frequent visitors to Catslate Studio and Catslate Camera Club.
Indeed, and you will see with some of my images that you'll recognize the models, and I've shot them in your studio and also in the White Room in the mill.
Okay, so you hopefully you can see your first image on screen there.
So I thought I'd show you some of my infrared images to start with. I have a camera that has been converted for infrared photography, which means I can't use it for color photography, and it's particularly suitable for monochrome, so I don't produce the sort of crazy colors that you can see with some infrared images. I like infrared photography because you can go out at midday and still get a reasonable photograph, and I also like the effect it has on foliage and water and skies in particular. So this image was taken a few years ago at Stowe Gardens in Buckinghamshire, The gardens are famous, and Capability Brown started his career here. I particularly like this photograph because of the juxtaposition of the bridge in the foreground and the chapel in the background. I've done quite a lot of work on it because it was taken, although it looks as if it was an overcast day, the light was actually quite bright, and I've had to darken down the foliage. And I've also lightened the bridge in the foreground to make it stand out a little better.
What camera have you got converted? Is it a fixed lens or an interchangeable lens camera?
It's an interchangeable lens camera. So
how have you found focus?
I haven't had too many problems with the focus at all. I started with a very old camera. In fact, it was the first digital SLR that we ever purchased between the two of us. And I did find I had problems with that, with a bright spot in the middle. I think also I was using Sigma lenses at the time. I've now got a more modern camera, not a particularly expensive model, but sufficient for the level I want to achieve with infrared. And I'm using Canon lenses, and I don't have so many problems. But no real problems with the focusing, no. So, not a great deal to say about this one. This one was taken in the Dordogne. It was a castle that's been totally renovated. It was occupied by the French in the 100 Years' War, and just down the river opposite, on the opposite bank, is another castle that was occupied by the English. This was apparently an area that was a centre of fighting during the 100-Year War. On to the next one. This is an abbey in Tuscany, and this is one of the few examples of where I've tried to introduce a bit of colour using the channel swapping technique, because the conversion I had done on my camera is more suited to black and white than to colour. I'm not actually able to achieve very much in the way of colour, but I thought it suited this particular.
So this would be yellow essentially. You'd have the blue and the yellow if it works.
The blue and the red channels you swap. What I particularly liked about this image, and I have several versions of it, is the sky. It was a particularly dramatic sky on that day.
The weather at the moment would really suit going out with an infrared camera.
It would indeed, and because we haven't really been able to get out and travel very far, I've not done any infrared photography except doing a bit of still life indoors.
Well, mine is sitting in a cupboard here, so these images have made me think I might get it out for the next day or two.
Yes, if the weather holds. I mean, it certainly lends itself to photography in these sort of conditions. Next one. This is one of the very early infrared photographs I took with my older camera. This is a park near us. It's about half an hour's drive from us in Cumbria. It's actually a deer park, but unfortunately on that day there were no deer there. And the building is a Grade 2 listed deer shelter. I particularly like this image because I think it's typically English parkland, and in its day, I mean, it's about 5-6 years old now, it did do quite well for me in competition.
Yeah, I do like the added contrast in the darks and the shadows there in that one.
Right, well, I couldn't resist showing you one wildlife photo, and there's a bit of a story behind this. This was taken up in the Cairngorms in February 2018, at least I think it was February. And 3 days before we went up to the Cairngorms, they'd had a huge snowstorm and several feet of snow. Unfortunately, we couldn't get up there, and by the time we did get up there, most of the snow had gone, at least at the lower levels. But I found 2 hares sitting relatively close to one another. So I lay down on the ground and gradually crept up on them. And I stayed there for about 3 hours. The ground was pretty cold, even though it wasn't covered in snow. And these 2 hares did very little. They just sat there occasionally washing. But eventually, this hare got up and stretched and yawned. And that's when I caught this particular image, which I'm pretty fond of, really.
It's absolutely pristine.
It was taken with my 1DX and the 100 to 400 lens. Fortunately, I didn't have to walk anything more than about a mile to get to this location. So this one, Ross, you have seen previously.
Did I give it an award?
You did, thank you very much. This was taken in the Camargue some years ago. We went on a trip to photograph the horses in the Camargue. And this was a very dull morning. And we stood in this, with up to about our knees, in this very muddy pool in chest waders, and watched these 2 stallions play fighting. We were told that the stallions were actually related to one another, and therefore the fighting wasn't serious, and we didn't actually see the horses harm one another. It was a very overcast day though, so the sky was very dull. So I thought I'd experiment with using textures, and I think this is the first time I used textures. And I'd just taken a photograph of a bathroom tile and superimposed it onto the sky and the whole scene, and then masked out, brushed out the horses. I think I probably used a bit of knit colour effects on it to bring out the detail and a bit of tonal contrast as well. But another version of this photograph did actually get into Edinburgh a few years ago, so I'm very fond of this one.
Excellent, well done. Ela.
You recognise the model taken in your studio. I started to dabble with composites, and the background was taken in Finland in a snowstorm. We'd gone there to actually photograph the brown European bears just coming out of hibernation. The bears were not being very cooperative at all. It actually involved staying in a hide for the whole of the night, from about 5 o'clock in the evening till 7 in the morning. It was absolutely freezing, and we only had one bear that disappeared the moment it started to get light enough to photograph. So I got bored and started taking pictures of the scenery instead. Anyway, I took Ayla in your studio, several different poses, and then used the forest in Finland as the background. So this is a composite with 4 or 5, maybe more layers. And I put a bit of graduated fog in as well to give it a more ethereal feel.
Was she photographed on the white stage initially?
Yes, she was. Yeah. Yes, made it easier to. She was actually quite easy to cut out on the white background. This is a bit of fun. Again, I was starting to experiment with composites and textures, and I started with the background, which was taken at Luscantire, so the hills and the sea were taken in Luscantire. The lighthouse was taken at Walney, which is on the west coast, about an hour's drive from us. I put the two together and I wanted to create a sort of impression of a storm coming. So on top of the image, I have superimposed a stormy sky, and then I think I used 3 different textures on top of that, experimenting with opacity and blending modes to come up with this image. And surprisingly, this image has done reasonably well for me in club competitions and international salons.
You'll be giving people a few ideas now to go and cut out the prizes.
And you'll recognise this model and where this was taken too.
Yeah.
As you know, this white room has big windows, and again, it was an overcast day, so I just got a grey background, and I thought, what can I do? You know, it wasn't very complimentary, so I thought, well, I'll try combining 3 different images of Emma, and this is what I ended up with. Again, on different layers, reducing the opacity the further back I went, just to give the feeling of recession. And this is another image that has done reasonably well for me, particularly in America. Now, you obviously like this one over there. And this is my most recent effort. I started with the background and combined 2 images taken at Beamish Living Museum, which is over on the northeast of England. Great place to go if anyone is over this way. I wanted to create the feeling of it being late in the afternoon in winter. So after creating the background, I then made 2 different versions of the background. One was darker and had a more bluey tinge, and the one underneath it was lighter with a yellowy tinge. And I then brushed out the areas where I wanted to see the yellowy tinge coming through in the windows, for example, and in the tram. The next step was to put the figure in, and I'd taken him at a Victorian extravaganza shoot, again some years ago. And then the final step was to create the snow, which I created in Photoshop. So I had a lot of fun putting this one together, and it's not really been out there yet, so not really tried and tested. But
have you used what I would call the Irene Froy white layers technique there for the background?
There is yes, there is a little bit of a white layer in there as well, yes, just to mute the background a little bit.
Is that 10?
That's my 10, yes, thank you very much.
Thank you, Julie, nice to see you. So we are on to our last man, Paul Hanley. Paul, are you unmuted?
Yes, I'm here.
Good evening, Paul.
Good evening, all, and to all of you who have stayed to the end.
So, Paul, you're not really a competition photographer.
I'm not, by any stretch of the imagination, a competition photographer. Although you may have got the email today as well, Ross. The RUA are looking for submissions. So
I
you
did
must
that email was strange. Are they, what?
I know that it's this year's exhibition. Presumably they're hoping to hold the exhibition. So that'll be,
Yeah, okay.
October that would be. So they're obviously.
You are a retired consultant radiologist, enjoying your retirement.
Yes.
A lot of your photography could basically be described as architectural reflections and symmetry would all be very strong in your photographs.
Yeah, well, when you asked me to do this, I sort of had a look through my Lightroom catalogs, and you know, it's that thing of best images or favorite images, I suppose, because I have a connection with each of them. It's hard to choose, you know, it's sort of Sophie's choice. But this was an image that sort of started me down a pathway of photographing places and spaces. And the key to the photographs are the people. And the people in my photographs are not the main subject. So this is a photograph taken in New York. I don't have great luck as a photographer. I get bad weather when I travel to sunny places. And I hadn't been in New York for 5 years. And I went in 2015 in September thinking it'd be nice, the weather would be good. And I arrived in New York just ahead of a tropical storm that lasted the whole week. And it bucketed. So taking shelter inside, this is a piece of architecture by Calatrava. And it's actually, it wasn't finished. They were still building what is now the transport hub down at the World Trade Center. And it's typical Calatrava building, but at this time, it wasn't completed. And there was a lot of fencing around it. But there were all these posters for this great sort of shopping mall called the West Concourse. So I walked along this corridor directed to the West Concourse, and out the other end at the Brookfield Centre with the World Financial Centre, no vibrant shopping area. I walked back again. And then I went up a level to the entrance to the viewing gallery for the new Freedom Tower, that they like to call it, the new One World Trade Center, and asked there about this shopping arcade. And of course it was a render, an architecture's render. It didn't exist. This corridor was the West Concourse. And so when I was up there, I had this view down, and there were a lot of people on this passing to and fro, but just at that moment, these two were isolated. So I took this shot, and I'd always visualized, it was darker than this, and always visualized it as this lighter, high key sort of appearance. The other problem, if we go on to the next one, Ross, this was the day before, and this is the Museum of Modern Art in New York, and it was absolutely bucketing down. Now, as well as there being a tropical storm in New York at that time, I mean, they evacuated coastal areas. They closed all the viewing galleries on the tall buildings. I mean, it really was quite a storm. And on this day, it was pouring out of the heavens, and I thought, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go shopping. I'm going to go to B&H. Now, anybody who knows a bit about New York will know, I mean, it's one city block. It's a camera store of two floors, and it has everything for video, photography, sound. It's all there. It's an incredible place. So I got on the subway and got out at the nearest subway station with my umbrella in the absolutely pouring rain. And I walked to B&H, and there was a big poster up that said, "We are closed for the holiday of Sukkot," which is one of the Jewish high days and holidays. In fact, it was more than a day. It was closed for the entire week. I was in New York, so at least it saved me some money. So instead I went to MoMA, and dripping wet, and I was trying to get something interesting to photograph, but everybody else in New York seemed to have had the same idea of getting out of the rain that day. It was so busy. But I took this shot across the atrium, and in fact, this is a crop of a bigger shot. It's probably only about a quarter of the frame. But I had to wait to get these figures separated on the two levels. and so that there weren't clumps of people. And so I snapped that. But what I didn't see was my little friend here down bottom right, coming out of the corridor. And I hadn't seen him at all until I got the photograph back on the computer. And I just like this. I know there are blown highlights. The lighting this was incredibly dark where I was, and the sun had come out outside, and the light was really very difficult to control. But you know, I think sometimes that glaring light gives atmosphere, and I know that it's a no blown highlights in competition photography, but in real life it's a reality, and you know, you can only do what you can do with a single raw image. The next one is another example of bad luck. I'd marked various locations in Berlin to go to, and I'd seen some photographs taken in this building, and I thought, you know, that would be really an interesting place to explore. So it was a museum. It's called the Berggruen Museum, and it's part of a pair of museums near the Schloss Charlottenburg. So I'd marked it in Google Maps with a star, and I got the U-Bahn and off I went. And again, it was pouring with rain. And I arrived at this area and I looked where my star was, and there was a bunch of guys standing in front of a very nondescript door on a building. And then beside it, there was a big banner for a museum beginning with B, which I thought, oh, that must be it. So I went in, paid my money, and I wandered around and I thought, hang on, this is all ceramics and furniture. There's supposed to be Picassos here. So I came out and I thought that was very strange, and I couldn't find this staircase, and I thought that's really odd. And I went back to my hotel and I looked at the ticket, and I got my laptop out and I looked on the map, and there was the door that the guys were standing blocking was actually the door to this museum. So I'd gone into the wrong museum, and so I had to wait until my next trip to Berlin to go back, and I eventually got back. And in fact, this was then, I suppose, my second real trip, but my third journey to this museum, because initially I was using, I had a 16-35 lens, which was the widest. I shoot with Sony mirrorless full frame, and at that time that was the widest focal length that's available. But they released a 12-24, so I went back and I lined up this shot, and then this chap started to walk up the stairs into the shot, and I thought, you know what, that's what I need. The light in the place is much darker than this, and again, on this occasion it was a bright sunny day in September, and so to try to get the range of light on one frame would have just been impossible. And I was hanging over the rail with the camera out at arm's length to angle up to get this. There is no way I could have got this, and actually, to be honest, there is no way that I could have used a tripod in here. In fact, a lot of the interior spaces, really, it would be impossible to use even a gorilla pod. The people manning the galleries in here, I do think that they're all former employees of the Stasi. They are absolutely on your shoulder at every turn. And in one photograph I took in here to try and get the angle, I was hunkered down in a corner and I just gently leaned back against the wall, and one of them shouted at me that I wasn't allowed to lean against the wall. So yeah, if you're going there, there's no problem photographing, but don't expect to lean against walls or use a tripod.
Strikes me as the Ministry of Funny Walks.
Well, this is another just opportunistic shot. I took a trip to Valencia. I'd seen lots of photographs of this. Again, Calatrava architecture, the City of Arts and Sciences. And I picked the closest hotel to this that I could stay in. It was great. So this was my first day. I just arrived. I went out with the camera. And I was looking at this. I had the camera, unusually for me, I had the camera on a tripod. And I was looking at getting this frame within a frame shot and lining it up and just getting the camera angled right when this guy just marched in front of me. And I just thought, well, that's it. That's the shot, and click, and that was it, done. But the problem was I really wasn't prepared. I was still fiddling about with things and trying to get the composition right and get everything leveled. So I had really no idea, in fact, what the camera was set at that stage. And in fact, I had a polarizing filter on that had caused a gradient across the sky that I've had to sort of eliminate. But yeah, I mean, I really like this. And I mean, I couldn't have got it at a better moment with that guy's stride across. And if any of you have been to Berlin, you know, in West Berlin, they have on the pedestrian crossings the little Ampelman. And I think he reminds you, except for that he's not wearing a hat, he reminds me of the little Ampelman. I've sort of given up on a lot of YouTubers, but there's one that I do continue to follow, but he doesn't put out much content. Is a young chap called Jamie Windsor. And just before a trip to Germany, he did a video about our obsession as photographers with dynamic range and, you know, not allowing things to fall into shadow. So this is a square in Munich, and the rough stone building to the left is, that's the corner of the synagogue. And it was a really bright sunny day, and this corner really appealed to me with the contrast between the light and shadow. And I stood there, and I was really waiting for a cyclist. And I waited, and of course, as somebody appeared in the right position, somebody else would walk into the shot from the other side. And I don't like sort of taking people out or adding things in. And so I stood patiently waiting. And I did get a cyclist, but actually, I think this chap in his dark suit with his briefcase and his dark glasses, it looks like one of the Blues Brothers. Just caught in the light. And I have to say now, in camera, I have darkened this. One of the photographers that I think the work is fantastic, and I'd love to get books by Fan Ho, who was a photographer in Hong Kong in sort of the 40s and 50s. And he has some wonderful shots where he uses light. But a lot of it is actually done in the darkroom. But I just like that contrast of shadow and light, and then the single figure position. This is another bad luck or bad preparation story. This is the wonderful public library in Stuttgart. And I'd seen lots of photographs of this, and I was arranging a trip over to Germany, and I wasn't really sure whether it was worth going to Stuttgart just to photograph in the library. But I have to say this was my second attempt to visit the library. The first attempt, I booked trains. I love traveling by train in Germany, and you can get great deals on first-class train travel. So I'd actually booked, my son works in Potsdam near Berlin, lives there, and so I was going to Munich to photograph in the U-Bahn in Munich. But the hotel I wanted, I'd sort of booked the trains, and I'd booked 4 days, but the hotel I wanted, I could only get 3 days. So I decided I would go up to Stuttgart for one night, and I booked, there's a great chain of motels called Motel One in Germany, and they're fantastic. And I booked the Motel One close to the Hauptbahnhof, which was a short 10 minutes walk from the library. Thought, right, I'll get the train up in the morning, go up to the library in the afternoon, and I'd already booked my train from Munich back to Berlin, or up to Berlin. So I had to be back the next day. I had to get the 9 o'clock train the next day to get back to Munich, to get then the train up to Berlin, which I'd pre-booked. So on a Thursday in May, it was the 10th of May, I headed off on the train to go to Stuttgart for one night, with the sole purpose that afternoon of photographing the this library. And as I proceeded on the journey with my laptop on the train, sitting in first class luxury, it was lovely, I went online and I discovered that actually the next day was a public holiday in Stuttgart, and everything, including the library, was going to be closed. So I arrived in Stuttgart. Not only was everything closed, but it was pouring with rain. And so I spent a miserable day, rainy day in Stuttgart, and then got the train back to Munich and off to Berlin. So on the second attempt, a year later, I actually then made sure there wasn't any public holidays and made sure the library was open, and I travelled to the library. And it's the most beautiful, elegant building. And
what kind of lens do you need for this type of shot?
well, this was the 12 to 24 lens, and I think actually it was taken at 14mm, that shot. And again, I like, it's the symmetry, it's the detail, and the single figure. And thanks to Google Maps, because when you go into the detail in these things, you click on the library, you can actually look at the opening hours, and it also shows you times of the day when places are busy. And so the best time to go to this library is just after it opens or just before it closes in the evening. And this is a shot of the atrium in that library. Those stacks, if you go back to the previous one, Ross, just quickly. So those stacks are above above this atrium, and below, out of shot, there's a skylight above, and then there's another skylight. And if you go to the next one, and that's it there on the roof of this, and this is the bottom half of this beautiful, elegant building. There's a major infrastructure building project going on involving road, underpasses, the railway, complete redesign of the railway station right beside this. So actually I don't really have any photographs of the outside of the building, unfortunately, because of that. Again, my wonderful luck. But this is taken at 12mm with that 12 to 24 Sony lens. The great thing about that lens is it's sharp, but it's light. It's an f4 lens, but for that focal length, it's about a third the weight of any of its competitors, and it's a fantastic lens, and it's the lens I use mostly now for this type of shot. There isn't there's no glass in these little windows, so I'm again leaning out, hand holding the camera to get the angle, and then just waiting to get a figure. That's one of the security staff. They're very good about photographing in that library. They give you a little sticker to put on your coat, and they give you a little piece of paper in your, they have it in English, just giving you the rules about photography in the library. Now this is one of my favorite places in Berlin. It's the sort of Parliament complex on the river. And I have photographed this building, the Mary Elizabeth Luder's house, and I've photographed it often. And this particular shot had arrived in Berlin, and it was when we had flights from Belfast, but we're 7 in the morning, so we arrived in Berlin very early, and couldn't check into the hotel, but I left my suitcase off, but I had my backpack with all my camera gear and my laptop in it. So I jumped in the S-Bahn, and went to the Parliament buildings. And I crossed over from the Hauptbahnhof, and you cross over the river, and I was walking down towards this, not really thinking about what I was doing, and I actually hadn't even taken my camera out of the bag. And as I walked down towards this, I saw these two people on the other side. I'm on the opposite bank of the river with my back to the main Parliament building. And I saw these two approaching from either side. And I thought, if I put a bit of spring in my step here, I can get there and get a shot of this with these two people in. So I literally pulled the camera out of the bag and ran and steadied myself and watched and just kept my fingers crossed that nobody else came into the shot. And that is where they were. There's no photoshopping. That is the two people walking towards each other.
So you have no luck.
Well, I don't have luck with weather. I mean, that was a very overcast day. This was another sort of lucky shot with people. So people often ask me, say, how long will you stand and wait for someone to appear in the shot? And the answer to that is as long as it takes, depending on whether I think the shot is going to be worth waiting for. And this one was bizarre. I had another black and white shot that did well in local club competitions taken here. A friend and I had gone to London for the day. We'd flown in the morning. We were flying out in the late afternoon to go and see the Don McCullen exhibition and go and visit Steve Bray, and still in the days when there was hope of sanity. But he had never been to Southwark Station, and we were making our way from Tate Britain via Westminster and across the river. And we were heading, we came up in Southwark Tube Station, and I was showing him this, and it was really for him to get some shots. But I had the 12mm or the 12 to 24mm on my camera, and while he was fiddling about getting his tripod set up, I was framing a shot. Now, I have to say that this was 1:30 in the afternoon, believe it or not. And there was just whatever the gap was between trains. And just on the right of that central structure, there's a guy just about to come into shot. And so I had a moment really to grab this striking red-haired woman who had just walked out from the platforms before people appeared then above or out of the other access to the other platform. So it was, again, this was just a grab shot. But again, like a lot of my stuff, it's more about the place than the people. The people add, I think they add the essential ingredient to the photographs. And this one, this one's probably where someone is this is probably the most prominent human in any of my photographs. Maybe I suppose the little guy in Valencia, maybe too. But I was actually taking photographs in this U-Bahn station in Berlin. And I was actually photographing the opposite line on the other side of this platform. And I had my camera on a gorilla pod on the back of a bench, trying to get a long exposure of one of the trains. When I heard a train coming in behind me, and when I looked round, I saw graffiti on the train, and I thought, that looks interesting. So I lifted the camera with a gorilla pod attached, which was set for a sort of a 5-second exposure. And I walked along the platform with the train, thinking there's no point, I'll not get the graffiti if the train is moving, so I have to walk with it to sort of keep pace as the train slowed down. But when I got to it and the doors opened, I realized it's just a photograph of graffiti and it's not very interesting. So I had the camera up to my eye and I took it away, and then out of the corner of my eye I saw this woman in the yellow and blue dress just walking quite rapidly in front of me. and I think I managed to turn the shutter speed dial enough to get about 1/10 of a second. I tell a lie, I actually got it to 1/30 of a second, and just grabbed 2 shots. I didn't even have it on rapid sequence. I just had to hit the shutter a couple of times, and it was pre-focused on the train, and she blurred her way past. But that actually is probably my most successful photograph, because last year I entered it into an art exhibition, the Royal Ulster Academy of Art annual exhibition, and not only was it chosen along with another shot, but I actually managed to sell five framed copies of it, which was quite nice.
Charge enough for them either.
Sorry?
You didn't charge enough for them.
I think, Ross, that's why I sold 5 of them. I think they were cheap and people bought them.
Okay, thank you, Paul. I'm going to stop sharing. Folks, that is it for this evening. Thank you all for hanging around. As usual, we've gone on for over 3 hours, etc. So that's why I sort of made my mind up that to be the last.
So what does she mean by that?
This format. So next week I will be doing my own sort of pick of the top images from all 5 weeks of the presentation that we've had. So give me a second till I stop recording.